Chapter 925. Seeing that the center of the army had been surrounded, there were no reinforcements. Hun Sen cursed inwardly as he retreated with his soldiers. He knew that even before the battle started he had already lost 3 points in terms of morale. In addition, the news said that the mercenaries liked to attack at night, so he wasn't prepared. As a result, he lost the initiative and this battle was already a lost cause. Hun Sen quickly made the decision to flee and left the center of the army. If he had remained in the center of the army, it might have taken some effort to find him. However, since he had left the main force, this group of men on horseback was extremely eye-catching. Hun Sen, don't run. When Zhou Xian, the regiment commander of the 4th Division's 1st Regiment, saw the general riding a horse, dressed in bright armor, and saw the large banner with the word Hong on it, he immediately recognized the other party's identity. His eyes were bloodshot as he fiercely fired a volley of bullets forward. Soon after, a few gold-rimmed soldiers who were closer to him were hit and fell to the ground, immediately causing another group of soldiers to kneel and surrender. Bastard! Zhou Xiang slapped the machine gun in his hand. He knew that he would not be able to catch up to Hun Sen without a horse to ride. This great merit would fall into the hands of the 1st Cavalry Division. Hun Sen could not outrun a horse. He turned around and saw that the mercenaries had been left behind. He let out a sigh of relief. Although he had lost the battle, he had at least managed to keep his life. He still had a chance to rise again. General, run. There are cavalry chasing after us. Just as Hun Sen felt that he could breathe a sigh of relief, a sharp-eyed soldier beside him called out. He tilted his head and looked in another direction. Sure enough, there were a few hundred warhorses galloping in his direction, closing in on him. Hun Sen immediately felt his blood run cold. He clamped his legs together and lashed his horse with the horsewhip in his hand. Hun Sen sped up again. Chase. That must be a big fish. The 3rd Regiment commander Hubo stared at the fleeing Hun Sen with excitement in his eyes. Behind him, there were 2 battalions of 800 warhorses following him like a shadow. The soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division were not only physically strong, but also had better knife skills than ordinary people. Even their warhorses were faster than other warhorses. In order to achieve such speed, these warhorses usually ate fine fodder, which made their fur shine. When they ran, it was as if the gods were helping them. With one chasing the other, the distance between the 2 sides was constantly narrowing. It was already less than 300 meters away. Hun Sen, who was running at the front, looked back more than once. Every time he did that, he would whip his horse with all his might so that he could run faster. However, in front of the world's #1 Cavalry Division with top-notch equestrian skills, no matter how hard he tried, the distance between the 2 sides was still rapidly closing. From 300 meters to 250 meters, to 200 meters. General, run. We'll stay and stop him. A bodyguard who had followed Hun Sen for many years and had received Hun Sen's favor saw that it was not a good idea to continue. He immediately stopped and drew his sword to prepare for battle. Beside him, there were more than a dozen bodyguards who stayed behind to fight for a chance for their general to escape. These bodyguards were also good fighters. They followed Hun Sen for a long time and they usually ate and used the best food. Now it was time for them to show their strength. Each of them held a saber in their hands, ready to fight to the death with the cavalry. Perhaps they had overestimated themselves, or perhaps they had underestimated the enemy. With just a dozen cavalry, it was a joke to think that they could stop the 800 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division. Huboer's eyes flashed with mockery when he saw that the enemy had left someone behind. Then he reached for the bow on his back and shot an arrow through the air. To the people of the grasslands, archery on horseback was like farming in the Central Plains. It was a skill that everyone had to know. To be able to join the 1st Cavalry Division, the soldiers had to undergo strict horse archery tests. Regardless of whether it was a fixed target or a moving target, it was a skill that was ingrained in their bones. There were only a dozen enemies, how could they stop them? The arrows were shot from afar. It was as if the arrows had grown eyes, or as if iron had encountered a magnet. The arrows steadily pierced into the dozen or so bodyguards. It was a pity that they wanted to stop the pursuers and buy time for the general to escape. But in reality they were just fixed targets. They did not even have the chance to swing their swords. After a round of arrows, they fell to the ground one by one like hedgehogs. Hun Sen, who was turning his head, witnessed the entire scene. He couldn't help but shudder. Who the hell is this person? How could he have such exquisite archery skills? How could he defeat such an opponent? At this moment Hun Sen felt a great sense of fear. He suddenly realized that whether it was himself or the entire Golden Border dynasty, they knew too little about mercenaries. In the past they only thought that the enemy had very advanced firearms. But now the enemy's cavalry was also terrifying. With such an opponent, the Golden Border dynasty's defeat was inevitable. The bodyguards left behind did not play any role in stopping the enemy. The distance between the two sides was still narrowing. Just as the distance between the two sides was getting shorter and shorter, an opportunity appeared in front of Hun Sen again. He found nearly 1,000 infantry troops. They were the rear troops of the 50,000 troops. Because of their excellent position, they escaped as soon as they found the situation was not right. Now they were caught red-handed by Hun Senator of course. Hun Sen did not intend to punish them at this time. These people were born to be good shields and scapegoats. All of you stop right there and attack the enemies behind you. They don't have as many people as you do. If anyone dares to run again, I will kill them immediately. Hun Sen's survival instincts made him speed up again, and his voice sounded even more anxious. More than 1,000 Golden Border soldiers, who were running away with their heads down, heard Hun Sen's shout. When they looked back and saw that it was their general who was chasing after them, they all showed a gloomy expression. According to the military law of the Golden Border dynasty, escaping from a battle and being defeated in a battle were completely different. It was the difference between life and death. They thought that no one would notice them because the battlefield was in chaos. They could say that they were defeated on the battlefield. Who would know? But now they were caught red-handed by the general. It was really difficult to explain. What are you looking at? As long as you can block the pursuers for 15 minutes, you will all be meritorious. You can ask me for a reward later. After being a general for so many years, he had already seen through the mentality of the soldiers. He knew what he had to say to make these people work for him. Hun Sen's shout was tantamount to giving these soldiers hope. Since there were more than 1,000 of them, it should not be difficult to block the pursuers for 15 minutes. At that moment, the army of over 1,000 people stopped and opened up a path for Hun Sen to escape with a dozen of his personal guards. Then they crossed the road, each holding a spear or a long saber, as if they were going to fight the pursuing cavalry. Release the arrows. Seeing that the prey was about to escape, Hu was not willing to let it go. He took the lead and shot an arrow. The arrow flew out and pierced the chest of a Golden Border soldier. The soldier who was shouting and fighting spirit did not even have a chance to retaliate before he was killed by the arrow. At the same time, more arrows flew out and pierced into the bodies of the gold-rimmed soldiers who were blocking the road ahead. One by one the soldiers fell to the ground. The power of the arrows was not inferior to the fire of the flintlock. One by one their comrades died in front of them. Most of them were killed by an arrow. This scene frightened the Golden Border soldiers behind. They thought that they could hold on for a while because of their numbers. Only after fighting did they realize how laughable their thoughts were. Retreat, retreat quickly. A Chiliarch mixed in with the soldiers saw how powerful the cavalry was. He knew that they could not stop the enemy with their strength. Forcing them to stay here would only be throwing away innocent lives. He immediately gave the order to retreat. Some people retreated because of this, and the defensive line that the Golden Border soldiers had just set up collapsed before it could do anything. Some of the soldiers who were too slow finally ran into Hu and the others. With a flash of swords and sabers, dozens of heads flew into the air. This shocking scene forced many of the Golden Border soldiers to kneel and surrender. Facing the unstoppable 1st Cavalry Division, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, unable to retaliate at all. Hu did not pay any attention to the kneeling Golden Border soldiers and continued to lead the cavalry forward. They passed by them and continued to chase after their target. General Senator Hun Sen used the thousands of soldiers as a meat shield to fight for a chance of survival. Just as he was about to take a breather, a soldier beside him fell from his horse with a plop. He was so shocked that his whole body trembled. He immediately turned around to take a look. What he saw almost scared his soul out of his body. The cavalry that he had left behind had reappeared, and they were less than an arrow's distance away from him. Ah, save me. At this moment Hun Sen was truly scared out of his wits. He did not even think about surrendering. Instead he instinctively screamed and whipped his horse in a panic, wanting to escape. Hubo did not intend to take Hun Sen's life with his first arrow. Since he was a big fish, he naturally wanted to capture him alive. However, when he saw that Hun Sen was still struggling and trying to escape, he finally gave up the idea of capturing Hun Sen alive. Riding on the horse, he raised his bow and shot at Hun Sen's back. Chapter 926. The sound of something breaking through the air came from behind him. If it was in the past, Hun Sen would have been alerted, but now he was on the verge of going crazy. His warhorse was galloping furiously and he could not feel anything. Suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his back. Following that, he felt his energy being sapped away and even his gaze became weak. Save. Before he died, Hun Sen did not forget to reach out towards Golden Rim City. Then with a thud he fell off his horse. Hun Sen was dead. Hun Sen had died in battle and his corpse was picked up by Huo, who rushed over and carried on his horse. The army returned victorious. This time Huo had killed to his heart's content. He once again felt as though he had galloped through the grasslands without being defeated. This was all thanks to the 1st Cavalry Division and Yang Chendong. In this battle they had killed over 10,000 enemies, captured 30,000 and escaped. With such a result, the combined losses of the Cold Front Division and the 1st Cavalry Division only amounted to less than 100 casualties. Soon after, Yang Chendong arrived and held a celebration. In front of the 8,000 auxiliary soldiers, 8,000 Laotian soldiers and hundreds of thousands of civilians, he gave a great performance to the 1st Cavalry Division and the 4th Division of Lung Feng. With a wave of his hand, 5 silver carriages were pushed out. These were the rewards he had given to the 2 divisions. After chasing Hun Sen for tens of li, Huo, who had killed Hun Sen, was praised by Yang Chendong. He was awarded a 2nd-class merit medal and a gold medal. He had also become the first knight of the 1st Cavalry Division to receive such an honor. Huo received the medal from Yang Chendong with tears in his eyes. He then thanked Yang Chendong profusely, starting from how he was a defeated general. For someone of his status, after Tuo Tuobua's death, it should have been difficult for him to make a name for himself. However, the mercenaries did not care about your past, only your current performance. Huo had a new lease of life, and his deeds quickly spread across the land. At the end of his speech, Huo even thanked his teacher Tianhu. Because it was Tianhu who had set his eyes on Hun Sen at the very beginning, but he had given the opportunity to chase after the enemy. Just based on this, as a subordinate he was convinced. At the same time, this incident also demonstrated Tianhu's general demeanor. A truly qualified general should be like Tianhu, knowing how to give credit to his subordinates. In this way he could also receive the gratitude and loyalty of his subordinates at the same time. The silver was distributed on the spot and delivered to the hands of every meritorious soldier. This scene was seen clearly by others. At this moment not only the auxiliary soldiers and the Lao army were envious, but also many young men of the Golden Border dynasty who were mixed among the civilians were envious. From what Huo had said, they knew that this was a defeated general who had lost many times. Such a person could be put in an important position. What did they lack? As long as he was willing to work hard, wouldn't he still have a chance? At this moment, many people began to ask if the mercenaries were still recruiting, and expressed their desire to join. When Beta Persei heard about this, he immediately reported to Yang Chendong, and then said with a look of admiration, "Young master, you're amazing. You defeated their country, but not only do they not hate you, they even want to join the army and serve you. That's because I can give them something that the Golden Border dynasty could not." Beta Persei, remember, the people are always like this. Whoever treats them well, they will get close to that person. They don't have a long history and culture, so they don't have a strong sense of nationality. As long as we can ensure that they have a good life in the future, they will not be enemies with us. Instead, they will be used by us. Yang Chendong said emotionally. For a moment he thought about the Japanese attack on China during World War II. At that time it was not only China that was attacked, but many nearby countries were attacked as well. However, it was proven that only the people of China continued to resist, while the surrounding countries submitted as soon as they were conquered. This was the foundation of the Han people. Because they had a long history and had too many things to be proud of, they were destined to not allow the other races to be above them. This was the pride of the Han people and also Yang Chendong's pride. What he needed to do next was to continue this pride and make it even more glorious. Let's go. Leave this place for the auxiliary soldiers and the people to clean up. The main force will head to Borromean City. With a wave of his hand they began to move forward again. In Golden Border City, the news of Hun Sen's defeat and death spread like an earthquake, causing great damage and destruction to the capital. Some of the people who were originally in favor of war began to waver, and some of the people who were in favor of peace began to gain the upper hand. After several battles, the Golden Border Dynasty's 50,000 navy was destroyed, and most of them were captured. The army lost 150,000 soldiers, and the rest, except for the 100,000 soldiers who were resisting the mercenary navy in the south, had only 60,000 soldiers left in the capital. This strength was not enough to defend the capital. At this moment, the Golden Border Dynasty fell into an unprecedented crisis. In the palace of the capital, King Boromir was cursing, "Where are the reinforcements from Siam and Ava? When will they arrive?" "Your Majesty, the news has been sent. They are protesting in Laos and are preparing to send troops. However, the war came too suddenly and they need time to prepare." Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei had only been in office for a few days, but he seemed to have aged a lot. In the past few days he had not slept much. Recruiting soldiers, setting up defenses, deploying troops, everything had to be done by him. He even had to do everything himself. People say that when a book is used, it will be used. When a country is in a life and death situation, there will be few people who can be used and few people who are loyal. Protest? Prepare? Boromir laughed wildly and shook his head. It's too late, it's too late. With the mercenary army's offensive, it would take them at most 10 days to reach the capital. Soon the capital would be plunged into the flames of war. What would be the point of reinforcements arriving after that? Men, quickly inform the Spanish ships that we have agreed to their previous request, but they must help us drive the mercenaries out. Your Majesty. Tintinwai's body trembled when he heard this. He raised his head and looked at Boromir in disbelief. The Spanish are also ambitious. On the surface they say that they want to rent our city, but in reality they want to wedge a nail in our territory. They will slowly nibble away at our territory in the future. This king knows. This king knows everything. But do we have a choice now? The Spanish threat will come later, but the mercenaries are already in front of us. If there is no other way, our country will be destroyed. Boromir's eyes were filled with tears. One was a wolf and the other was a tiger. It was not easy for him to be sandwiched between them. But now, in order to drive the tiger away, he could only take the initiative to lead the wolf into the door. Ding Dingwei wanted to persuade him, but he didn't know what to say. As the minister of the left and the most trusted person of the king, he wanted to solve the king's worries and do something for the dynasty. But how could he change the situation with his own strength? At this moment he could only sigh and shake his head with a face full of regret and hatred. He hated himself for not being able to solve all of this. Minister of the left, before the Spanish army arrives, we must defend the capital. This is our last trump card. Boromir said as if he was exhausted. Yes. Ding Dingwei nodded. This time the loss of the Gilded Dynasty was too great. If they could withstand this ordeal, the next step would be to work hard, reform vigorously and develop business and military. In any case they had to find ways to be strong. Otherwise they would be beaten if they fell behind. The carrier pigeon flew out of the palace and went straight to the hands of Kamoy, the envoy of the dynasty who had been staying in the Spanish warship. Looking at the imperial edict written by the king, Kamoy's face showed a painful expression. Then he quickly sorted out his thoughts and adjusted himself to the best state. He strode toward the main cabin of the warship not far away. Miguel, the special envoy and naval general appointed by King Juan II of Spain, was chatting with Vice Admiral Cruz in the cabin. The content of their conversation was naturally the current situation. At this time the Kingdom of Spain and the Kingdom of Portugal were Western powers. There were no hegemonic countries such as the United States, so they represented hegemony. Although the future Queen Isabel was only 3 years old and it was impossible for her to marry Fernando, the Prince of Aragon, and the two kingdoms of Castile and Aragon had yet to be united through marriage, Spain was already very powerful and prosperous at this time. Just like Portugal, they followed the mercenary ships across the Pacific Ocean and came to the Eastern world. They discovered civilized human beings here decades ago, and at the same time, their ambitions began to be exposed. As a special envoy, General Miguel soon became addicted to the Eastern world after discovering it. He found that the silk, porcelain, tea and so on here were all things that the Western world did not have and were in short supply. He found that there were too many novel things here, various goods in the Crimson City. He found that the weapons here were very backward and they were still swords from the cold weapon era. They were far inferior to the guns and cannons they used now. After discovering too many things, his selfishness also became inflated. The idea of wanting to use good things for himself was suddenly born. His eyes naturally fell on the weak dynasty of gold. Through understanding, Miguel found that although the strength of the countries in the Eastern world was average, they had a large population. It was almost impossible to dominate with the 20 warships and 2,000 soldiers he brought. If he wanted to gain a foothold here, the first step was to occupy a place and use it to slowly expand and develop. Chapter 927. With this idea in mind, Miguel got in touch with the Golden Border dynasty. In order to let the other party see his strength, he deliberately sold them 200 firearms. After earning a lot of money, the other party's attitude towards them became warmer. They even sent a messenger, Kamoy, to negotiate with them. The two sides negotiated. Everything else was easy to discuss, including bringing back the goods from here to the Western world. They could also sign a long-term contract to supply firearms and so on. For this, the Golden Rim dynasty was also willing to pay a large sum of money. However, when it came to renting a city to them, Kamoy directly refused. Kamoy said, "The Gilded Dynasty is a country with complete sovereignty and territory. It is impossible for them to rent out a city. This is a provocation to the royal family. The king, ministers, and the people will not tolerate it." The negotiations had to stop. Just as Miguel was still thinking about how to persuade Kamoy, the war suddenly broke out. A ship with a 5-star flag suddenly sailed into the port of the Goldilocks dynasty and began to disembark after a series of bombardments. Everything happened so quickly that by the time Miguel got the news and sent Deputy General Cruz to check on the situation, everything had already been settled. Because of this, Kurlets did not have the chance to see the moment when the mercenary navy showed off their power. This sowed the root of their destruction not long after. The port of the Golden Border dynasty was opened by the mercenary military force, so there was no need for peace talks. Miguel decided to wait and see. He wanted to see who won and who lost and how he would benefit from it. He did not have to wait too long. Before the war was over, Kamoy appeared and expressed that their king was willing to rent a seaside city to the Spanish navy. He did not even want any reward. He only asked them to drive the mercenary ships out of the sea. In the previous negotiations, Special Envoy Miguel bragged more than once about how powerful their navy is, how terrifying the power of their artillery is, and so on. In short, they described themselves as invincible in the world. Kamoy came with the intention of King Boromir, which made Envoy Miguel very happy. However, he didn't agree immediately because in his eyes, mercenaries were a better partner. The other party had more novel goods. Now that the Golden Rim dynasty was in danger and was about to be occupied by the mercenaries, why not have a good talk with the mercenaries? In such a sensitive period he might get more benefits. He only said that he needed to think about it and sent Kamoy away. Then Envoy Miguel called his Deputy General Cruz and asked him to talk to the mercenaries on his behalf. However, this time the cities they rented had increased from 1 to 3. Miguel's learning ability was very strong. During this period of time he learned that Eastern businessmen always liked to bargain when talking about things. Sometimes the asking price might be a frightening amount, but the real transaction price would be very low. When he first came here he had suffered a lot because of this. Now that he had experience he wanted 3 cities. In his opinion, even if he couldn't reach an agreement he could still negotiate. At least 2 cities shouldn't be a problem. But he didn't know that it was impossible for the mercenaries to negotiate with them about territorial issues. His approach was just asking for trouble. Cruz, who received the order, came to the port of Gombo in a warship disguised as a merchant ship. But what he didn't expect was that his ship wasn't approved. In desperation he had to drive a small boat into the port and saw Long Yuntian, the commander of the 1st Marine Army's 3rd Division, who was commanding the overall situation here. With Yang Qindong's words, Long Yuntian was not only no longer the acting head, but also the commander of the 3rd Division. His gratitude was needless to say. He had already made up his mind to follow the 6th young master for a lifetime. At this time he was commanding the 4th Marine Division to cooperate with the 6th Young Master's attack from the north. The Marine Cold Front was a dragon on the sea and a tiger on land. They were powerful. Although the Golden Rim dynasty sent 100,000 troops to support them, they didn't gain any advantage in the hands of Long Yuntian. They completed the orders of the 6th Young Master very well and destroyed the 50,000 Marines of the Golden Rim dynasty and captured most of the enemy. Long Yuntian was in a good mood these days because he also restrained the other side's 100,000 Marines. He received a report from the soldiers that a Spanish general wanted to see him. With curiosity and a good mood, the two sat together face to face in a courtyard in the port of Gombo. Cruz had a typical Westerner's face, white skin and blue eyes. But Long Yuntian, who often walked on the sea, saw many people like him, so he didn't care. He politely invited the other party to drink tea and even handed him a cigarette to show his hospitality. The reason why the mercenaries were so powerful in the end, in addition to Yang Qindong's ideas that played a big role in it, it was because of the commercial development. It was precisely because they had money that they had an invincible army, and that they could roam freely in any place. Long Yuntian thought that the other party wanted to do business with him, which could be regarded as a merit, so he greeted the other party warmly. Unexpectedly, the expectation was too different from what he imagined. The other party actually wanted to rent a seaside city and asked for 3 at once. He also deliberately pointed out that the mercenaries and the Golden Rim dynasty were in a stalemate and the Golden Rim dynasty had agreed to their request to rent a city. The indirect meaning was very obvious. The Golden Rim dynasty agreed. If the mercenaries didn't agree, then the next course of action for the Spanish warships was very clear. Damn, only 20 warships and they are so arrogant. They don't want to live. After hearing the other party's request, Long Yuntian's face showed an angry look. The translator sent by the First Red Nest Academy didn't speak. He knew that some words couldn't be translated casually. What did he say? Cruz looked at the translator puzzled. Although he didn't understand Chinese, he could see that Long Yuntian's expression seemed to be a bit wrong and his mood seemed to be a little bad. Division Commander Long said that he can't decide on this matter and needs to ask for instructions from above. The translator had no choice but to find an excuse with a smile. Well, then we'll wait for you to make a decision, but please hurry up. Our warships are parked not far away. As long as you agree, we can immediately provide artillery support to help you repel the soldiers of the Golden Rim dynasty. Cruz said proudly. At this moment, it was as if he could dominate the battle with a single move. Okay. The interpreter nodded with a smile, then conveyed Kurlut's message to Long Yuntian. At the end, he added some words of his own. Commander Long, you should ask the Dean before making a decision on this matter. Well, yes, ask the 6th Young Master. Long Yuntian nodded and agreed. He asked the translator to arrange a place for Cruz to rest. He went to the telegraph room and reported what happened here. The telegram was quickly sent to Yang Qindong. After reading it, his face was as calm as water, but the movements of his hands had completely exposed his thoughts. The telegram was tightly clenched into a ball by his right hand. Beta Persei telegram. Beta Persei, who rarely saw the 6th Young Master angry, immediately took out his pen and paper. At the same time, he felt sad for some people. Although he didn't know what the telegram was about, provoking the young master was no different from provoking the king of hell. The telegram was sent out and quickly reached Long Yuntian's hands. Looking at the telegram in his hand, his expression was first surprised, then excited and then dignified. Then he shouted, "Come, invite that Spanish Deputy General over." 3 hours later, Deputy General Cruz reappeared on the Spanish warship and reported the whole negotiation to the envoy Miguel. Did they agree? Miguel's face revealed a hint of surprise. Yes, General. Not only did they agree, but they also fully satisfied our requirements. They will give us 3 cities as a foothold. In fact, this is easy to figure out. These territories are not theirs to begin with. Naturally, they won't feel bad about giving them away. Of course, they also made 2 requests. Cruz smiled and took out the contract he signed with Long Yuntian. What are the requests? Miguel asked. First, find out the military headquarters of the Goldilocks dynasty in the south, and then destroy them. Second, hand over the messenger of the Goldilocks dynasty, Kamoy, to them. When Cruz said these 2 requests, there was no strange look on his face. Not only him but even Miguel also did not show a curious look. It was probably because these two requests were nothing to him at all. Or perhaps, this was an opportunity for them to show their strong combat power. It was a way to show off their means. He agreed to them. This time we will use this opportunity to attack the people of the Goldilocks dynasty and let the mercenaries see our strength. In this way, let's see if they dare to be dishonest when dealing with us in the future. Yes, General. Should I invite Kamoy over? Kurlutz had a sinister smile on his face. Kamoy, who was locked in the room, was still anxiously waiting for Miguel's answer. This time, in order to solve the siege of the capital, the king even agreed to give up the land in the city. This showed that the capital was already very dangerous. Now he only hoped that Miguel would agree to his request quickly. In the long wait, every passing minute was a torture for him. Finally, there was a knock on the door and Cruz's voice came out. "Mr. Messenger, our general wants to see you." Chapter 928. Kamoy met Miguel again as he wished and then got a very satisfactory result. The other party agreed to the deal and proposed to meet with their commanding general to discuss how to deal with the mercenaries. Although the number of reinforcements was only 2,000, they all had guns, and the Spanish warships also had cannons which were not available in the Golden Border dynasty. Once used well, it could play a role in a surprise attack and it was not impossible to reverse the situation of the war. Kamoy left happily, and when he returned to the ship a day later, he brought the news that the southern command of the Golden Border dynasty agreed to the alliance. Soon afterward, the 2,000 Spanish troops disembarked and left behind Kamoy's messenger. Then Long Yuntian received the information sent by Kurlutz, and the first and second groups set off. An unfathomable but chaotic battle began. Miguel led Kurlutz to attack the command center of the southern army of the Golden Border dynasty with 2,000 flintlock soldiers. Then the main force of the Navy's Cold Front Division suddenly appeared, surrounded the place, destroyed their command system and shot the commander. At first glance, it looked as if the mercenaries were working together with the Spanish army. But suddenly, the mercenaries opened fire at the unprepared Spanish army, who were about to enjoy the fruits of their victory. Finally, Hei's 3rd Division showed their strength. Both sides were using flintlocks, but one side was using flintlocks that were slightly more advanced than the Ming dynasties, while the other side was using a more powerful long-range and accurate rifle. Before the battle had even begun, the victor had already been decided. After a chaotic battle, Miguel, Kurlutz, Kamoy and others were captured. It was the so-called mantis stalks the silkworm, unaware of the oriole behind. The Spanish army, Kamoy and others were used and became captives in the hands of the mercenaries. Also captured were 20 warships belonging to the Spanish. They were occupied by the 4th Sea Division, and then the warships went straight to the harbor of Chimney City. The southern command of the Golden Border dynasty was destroyed, and the 100,000 troops were leaderless. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 4th Sea Division launched a full army charge. The army was defeated in the chaos and the southern defense line was broken. All of this was Yang Qindong's strategy, using the Spanish army to defeat the southern army of the Golden Border dynasty. Judging from the results, the process was not complicated, but it was complicated to have the courage to attack the Spanish. In other people's eyes, they definitely wouldn't act rashly without knowing the details. However, in Yang Qindong's eyes, all of this was nothing. First, he made use of the other party's belief in the contract to make them fight for him. After that, he immediately sent out troops to encircle and annihilate them. Now it seemed that the plan was well thought out and the result was successful. As for whether Spain would send people to cause trouble for him in the future? Sorry, even if they didn't come looking for trouble, Yang Qindong would still fight them. To him it was only a matter of time. This time it was just an appetizer. The defeat on the southern front was like adding hail to snow. The Golden Rim dynasty was completely in a passive position. At this moment, the 4th Army Division led by Yang Qindong and the 1st World Cavalry Regiment had successfully occupied the eastern city of Borromean. At this point, they were only separated from the capital by Dakmao City. It was no exaggeration to say that the Golden Rim city of the Golden Rim dynasty had appeared in front of the mercenaries. It was only a matter of time before they captured it. In the capital of Golden Rim City, when the news came, the entire capital was in chaos. Countless merchants and people wanted to escape from the war. There were even many family members of the officials among them. Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei, who had long predicted this, gave a death order. The 4 cities were closed. Even if they were trapped in the city and died, no one was allowed to escape. It was not that Ding Dingwei was ruthless. It was just that such a chaotic situation was likely to give the mercenaries a chance to enter the city. If that was the case, they would lose their last chance to negotiate with the mercenaries. Once the royal family was destroyed, Ding Dingwei would become the biggest sinner. The royal palace was no longer as high-spirited as before. Whether it was King Boromir, left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei, or Dagon, who was the general of the city's defense, they all looked very disheveled at this moment. Everyone looked much older and more haggard. What's the situation in the city? Is there any news from the Allies' reinforcements? Boromir was still sitting on the throne, but at this moment his eyes were listless and his body was weak. The 4 gates are closed. No one is allowed to leave the city. The situation is still stable. The food in the city is enough for at least 3 months. As for the Allies' reinforcements, they said that they are still preparing. They want us to hold on for 1 more month no matter what. Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei said these words weakly. He knew in his heart that the Golden Rim dynasty was finished. 1 month. Boromir sneered. The mercenaries' progress was so fast that not only did they catch him off guard but also the allies. Since that was the case, there was no need to rely on them. His gaze moved from Ding Dingwei to General Dagon. If we defend Golden Rim City to the death, can we hold on for a month? This. Dagon looked troubled. Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's difficult. But I and the 60,000 soldiers in the city will not retreat. At this moment, Dagon showed the calm side of a general in the face of death. This made Boromir feel relieved. However, there was no hope in resisting. What was the point of it? At most, more people would die. Report. At this moment, a messenger ran in from outside the hall. He knelt on the ground and looked at King Boromir. He lowered his head and said nervously, Your Majesty, news just came from the front lines. Darkmouth City has opened its gates and surrendered. The main force of the mercenaries is coming to the royal city. Ha ha ha. Boromir laughed when he heard the news. Then he smashed the crown that symbolized his status as a king on the ground. Surrender? Surrender? Could it be that this prince has mistreated them? Why don't they even have the courage to resist? Why? Ding Dingwei saw Boromir roaring like a madman and repeatedly said, Your Majesty, take care of yourself. You don't have to persuade me. My days are numbered, my days are numbered. Boromir shook his head. After a long while he looked at Ding Dingwei and said in an extremely weak voice, Since that is the case, let's negotiate with them and surrender. After saying this, Boromir seemed to have exhausted all his strength. Then he plopped back on the throne and waved his hand repeatedly. He wanted Ding Dingwei and Dagon to make the decision. The 2 civil and military officials wanted to say some words of comfort, but they felt that anything they said would be useless. They cupped their hands and left. Instead of saying anything, they might as well do what they were about to do. At the very least, they had to seek some benefits for their king through negotiations. They had to take advantage of the fact that they could still defend the royal city and make some demands. Right Minister Du Xi's residence was heavily guarded by soldiers. No matter how chaotic the royal city was, this place was still as peaceful as before. No one could disturb this place. Skylark's residence was the best protection. This was the backup plan that Boromir had left for himself. It had only been 20 days since the start of the war, but the situation had already turned upside down. Things had remained the same, but people had changed. Left Minister Ding Dingwei and General Dagon appeared in the Right Minister's residence together. The former Right Minister, Dagon, tactfully avoided meeting them. Ever since he agreed to go to court with Skylark, he was destined to retire from politics and enter business. Seeing that he was about to get what he wanted, he would naturally think of a way to facilitate this peace negotiation. In an extremely elegant and remote courtyard, the 3 of them met. Yunk was still as calm as ever. Even when Ding Dingwei and Daen came together, he didn't give them a second glance and continued to brew his tea. However, there were 2 chairs placed in front of him, indicating that he had already prepared everything. This place is really peaceful. I didn't expect Mr. Yun to be so calm when the outside world is so chaotic. It is truly admirable. Ding Dingwei looked at the surroundings and said emotionally, Don't worry, King Boromir can also live such a peaceful life in the future. As long as he doesn't want to, he can refuse to see any guests. At this moment the tea was ready. Skylark poured a cup for each of the guests and pointed to the chairs in front of him. "Thank you." Ding Dingwei and Dagon looked at each other and sat down together. The negotiation officially began. "If we choose to surrender now, I don't know how the Duke of Loyalty is going to treat my king and the ministers." Ding Dingwei took a sip of tea and went straight to the point. "The king will be put under house arrest and the other ministers will hand over half of their property. They will then be transformed into ordinary people. Of course, if anyone wants to serve the Duke of Loyalty, they can also submit an application. We will make appropriate arrangements according to their ability." Skylark quickly answered. He had studied these matters repeatedly over the years and already knew what to do. Skylark's answer was not out of Ding Dingwei's expectations. As far as he knew, the king of Jiaoji and the king of Lansong Kingdom were also treated the same way. However, he didn't expect it to be the Golden Bian dynasty's turn so soon. Thinking about it, it was as if everything happened yesterday. Although he knew that things should be done this way since it was a peace negotiation, of course, he had to strive for more conditions that were beneficial to him. Ding Dingwei immediately said, "I still have 60,000 soldiers in the capital and I still have the ability to fight. My king is not a defeated king. It seems a bit unreasonable to still have the same conditions." "You still have 60,000 soldiers?" Skylark seemed to be interested and raised his head. Chapter 929. Yes, we still have 60,000 soldiers. They are all elites and they can fight against many on the battlefield. We are really... General Dagon wanted to continue his introduction. Unexpectedly, Skylark opened her mouth and said, "They're just chickens and dogs. If you're not convinced, you can fight. The mercenaries can easily destroy them with less than 10,000 men. Do you believe me?" Skylark's calm aura changed as his gaze landed on Dain's body, becoming a little sharper. Dagon, who was being stared at, wanted to say no and shake his head. However, he knew that the people were in chaos and the morale of the army was low. The so-called 60,000 soldiers were just a number. If they really faced the mercenaries, they would definitely lose. Ding Dingwei sighed in his heart. He knew that his idea of using the army as a bargaining chip had failed. He also knew that they were meat on the chopping block. They had lost the right to speak and the right to make conditions. Yunk seemed to have noticed that Ding Dingwei was past his prime. He took out a telegram and placed it on the table. As the general of Chuanlong City, Hamo should have defended the city to the death and waited for reinforcements. However, not only did he not do so, he did not protect the people under his rule. Instead, he set his horse on fire, causing tens of thousands of people in the city to be injured and killed. Not only that, you even put the blame on the mercenaries. Now that Hamo has been captured, he has told the truth. Soon the truth will be revealed to the world. As an envoy, Hamo did not refuse the unreasonable request made by the Spanish army. Instead, he agreed to cede a city in exchange for benefits and asked them to send troops to deal with the mercenaries. This is clearly an act of dividing the country. He is a sinner of the Golden Border dynasty. Now that he has been captured by the mercenaries, he has confessed everything he has done. Both of you martial artists do not think about war and scholars do not think about remonstrances. Do you think there is any hope for the Golden Border dynasty even if it survives? Since he could no longer display his brilliance in Boromov's hands, it would be better for him to hand over his power and let us, the Duke of Faithfulness, change them. Just like Laos and Vietnam, the government is now harmonious, the economy is developing rapidly, and the people are living the life they want. Isn't that good? Isn't that what a subject wants to see? Skylark pointed at two things and spoke in a strict tone, forcing Ding Dingwei and Daen to lower their heads involuntarily. Yes, there were indeed a lot of internal problems in the Golden Bian dynasty. To solve this problem, it was not just a matter of money, but a fundamental change was needed. This could only be done by mercenaries. Facts also proved that in the areas they ruled, the lives of the people were indeed higher than other forces. Otherwise, there would not be people of the Golden Border dynasty who had escaped, and the Golden Border army would not have sealed the border, which eventually led to the end of the war. King Boromir was a despicable person. Even now, the silver in the treasury had not been touched. The recruitment of new soldiers was only halfway done. Who could say that the current state of the Gilded dynasty was not caused by this king? The two civil and military officials lowered their heads at this moment, speechless. They really did not know what to say. On the other hand, Skylark's stern expression disappeared in an instant. She regained her calm expression and said, "The Duke of Loyalty has already sent an order. Boromir must step down and leave this place. He must rush to another place where he is under house arrest. Of course his safety is guaranteed. Not only that, but the two of you as loyal subjects have a chance to see him once a year. Can be regarded as doing your duty as a subject. Oh, by the way, to do this, the two of you must stay and continue to do something for the Golden Bien dynasty. Otherwise you will not have such qualifications. Stay." Both Ding Ding Wei and Dayan were stunned. They did not understand what Skylark meant. Stay. This is the Duke of Loyalty's order. Now that the Golden Bien dynasty has been established, there are many things to be done. The two of you know the situation here better. Recently, your performance has also proved your ability and your character. The Duke of Loyalty admires this very much, so he asked you to stay. In the future, the Golden Bien dynasty will no longer exist, and it will be renamed Cambodia Province. Daen will be the garrison general here, responsible for the reconstruction of the army and the security of the province. Ding Ding Wei will be the deputy governor, responsible for the people's livelihood and economic development here. When it came to Ding Ding Wei, Young's face showed a trace of envy and said, "The position of deputy governor is already very high. It's not even lower than your current position of left prime minister. This shows how much importance the Duke of Loyalty values you." Skylark's sudden words were indeed beyond the two's expectations. They only wanted to be loyal to King Boromir, who had given them a lot of kindness. They did not expect to be chosen by the Duke of Loyalty. For a moment they did not know how to answer. However, Ding Ding Wei was accustomed to storms and waves. After a moment of hesitation he replied, "What if we don't agree? The Duke of Loyalty will not force anyone. If the two of you do not agree, you can enjoy the same treatment as the other ministers. However, I still suggest that the two of you stay. After all, we have persevered until now not only because of Boromir but also because of the people in the army." The Duke of Loyalty said that as long as the two of you stay, there will be no problem with the funds. As long as the expenses are reasonable, he will approve. Not only that, but the treasury left behind by Boromir will also be left in Cambodia Province. After the war, there are many things waiting to be done. The people are in a terrible situation. If we want their standard of living to catch up or even catch up with Laos and Vietnam, we will need to invest a lot of money. This is a good opportunity. I personally think that only the two of you understand the situation here. With the two of you, the people here will suffer less and they will not be bullied. If it was someone else, everything would be different. Although Yonk said that Yang Chendong would not force anyone, what he meant was that they should stay and ask them in the name of the people. This was Yang Chendong's intention. History had proven that the method of controlling the barbarians with the barbarians was effective. Since that was the case, why should he give up what was near and seek what was far away? He only needed to arrange the position of a provincial governor to oversee the overall situation. As for the other cadres, he still needed to keep some of the old ministers. This way he could save a lot of time to understand and work together. Ding Ding Wei and Daen listened attentively. Their hearts were already somewhat moved. Yonk had already said that the treasury would not be taken away, and the Duke of Loyalty would invest more money. In this way, with the idea that money made the world go round, the future Phnom Penh dynasty It should be said that the future of Cambodia province was still promising. Both of them were not too old and they also wanted to do something. Now that the era of Boromir had passed, even if it was for the sake of the future generations, they should do well. After this incident, the relationship between Yonk and the other two seemed to be a lot closer. When the two of them negotiated, they began to set out from the perspective of how to rebuild Cambodia province. Naturally, everything went according to their wishes. 4 days later, on the 31st day of the mercenaries' counterattack on the first blockade in Shangding City, the negotiation ended. On behalf of the mercenaries, Yonk accepted the surrender letter from King Boromir of the former Phnom Penh dynasty. From the beginning to the end, it only took a month. Although there was still a lot of work to be done after this, the speed at which the armed forces of a kingdom were disarmed was still shocking. Yang Chendong had said before that he would solve the problem of the Phnom Penh dynasty by force in 1 to 2 months. Now he had done it, and it was done with the best standards. This made Luan Shaochen, the governor of Laos who was in charge of logistics, feel less pressure. In order to restrain Siam and Ava from sending troops to help the Phnom Penh dynasty, Yuan Shaoqian first gave the merchants of the two countries a tax reduction and discounts on goods, and other benefits to show their friendship. It turned out that this trick was indeed very effective. When the news of the war came, the Phnom Penh dynasty sent people to seek military support from the two allies. These merchants made a lot of obstacles which slowed down the speed of the two countries' troops. Now that the Phnom Penh dynasty had changed its name to Cambodia province, their army still had not been assembled. Without external interference, now that the war was over, Siam and Ava had no reason to send troops. While they had to swallow this bitter fruit, they also began to strengthen their armaments because they had a feeling that the rapidly developing mercenary army would not let them stay. One day they would be eaten up like the Phnom Penh dynasty. For this reason, the kings of the two countries reached a private agreement that no matter which country was attacked in the future, the other country must unconditionally provide support. This was originally for their own survival. The spies of the Security Bureau and the CIA buried in the two countries reported this news to Yang Chendong. He just glanced at it and threw it aside. What he needed to do now was to stabilize the situation in Cambodia. It was true that he did not have more strength to conquer other countries. It was not that he did not have enough soldiers to conquer these two small countries, but that he did not have enough manpower to occupy and manage them. Not to mention, as soon as the war started, Baiming and Nanming had already taken action. Chapter 930. As more and more Han people entered the grassland's first city, and these Han people were sent there after being trained in Xianxia city, the spies of the northern and southern Ming went there one after another, using various means to extract information from these people. Yang Chendong was the leader of the mercenaries, and the fact that Xianxia city was his headquarters was basically known to the whole world. This time Yang Chendong took the initiative to attack the Phnom Penh dynasty, which made the northern and southern Ming feel a strong sense of crisis. So they also learned from him and took the initiative to start the expansion journey. For example, the southern Ming took the initiative to send an army to approach the sphere of influence of the king of Min Zhuang. Baiming also began to mobilize an army to rush to Datong Mansion and Xian Mansion. They wanted to launch a pincer attack on the Walla leader Yeshen in the Hetao area. The situation suddenly became tense because of this. Yang Chendong also ordered the commander of Tiger's Man in the first city to keep an eye on Baiming's every move. Once they found out that they had bad intentions, they should not be soft-hearted or afraid. When the enemy attacked, they just had to deal with them properly. While the first city was ready to defend, Yang Chendong also sent a telegram to the general of Yunnan province Hong Jin to send troops to Liangshan. He wanted to show his presence in front of the forces of Baiming and the king of Min Zhuang, and also indirectly warn both sides to be careful of his existence as a fisherman. In terms of original intention, Yang Chendong did not want to see the southern Ming unify the south. A strong and complete southern Ming was not what Yang Chendong wanted to see now. What he wanted to see was a serious internal friction in the southern Ming, which would play a better role in promoting his presence there in the future. No matter how chaotic the situation outside was, Yang Chendong's eyes were still on the newly established Cambodia province. When the capital, Phnom Penh city, also opened its door and surrendered, and King Boromir was secretly sent to Xianxia city, the previously prepared 340,000 people also went down the Mekong River. Among the 340,000 people, there were Han people in Xianxia city, Mongols in the first city, and foreigners in Laos and Yunnan province. Yang Chendong adopted the method of mixing sand to reduce the proportion of the original residents. However, in the face of Cambodia, which had a population of 4 million people, a mere 300,000 people could not solve any fundamental problems, which was also what troubled him the most recently. Sun Xiaoguang was one of the cadres that Yu Qian, the governor of Xianxia city, valued highly. When he was less than 40 years old, he was found to have the ability to manage and see the overall situation. He began to be put in an important position and participated in the construction of Xianxia city. This time, when Yang Chendong asked Yu Qian for him, he was entrusted with an important position and became the first governor of Cambodia province. At this time he was standing in the palace of Phnom Penh city, reporting to Yang Chendong about his work and some of the difficulties he was facing now. Governor Sun, leave a quarter of the palace as my office in the future. You can rebuild the rest of the place into a commercial street. Compared to the special geographical location of Cambodia province, this place will become an important base for the business of the sea route. If it is done well, the business here will be very promising. This can also make this place a place to generate tax. You must seize the opportunity. Looking at Sun Xiaoguang, Yang Qindong gave advice on the local conditions. Yes, sixth young master, Xiaoguang understands. Sun Xiaoguang replied in a deep voice. Although in terms of age he was much older than Yang Qindong, it did not prevent him from admiring the sixth young master. Perhaps in the entire Xi'an city, there was no one who did not respect the sixth young master who had brought them everything they had today. Compared to Laos and Vietnam province, Cambodia's territory is not very big. It should be easier to manage. I will see your performance. By the way, do you have any difficulties? Feel free to tell me. If I can solve it, I will help you. Yang Qindong spoke again. This time he met Sun Xiaoguang not only to encourage him in his work, but also to help him solve practical problems. Everything was ready. Logically speaking, Sun Xiaoguang only needed to develop slowly according to the plan. It was only a matter of time before changes and gains were made. However, since he had the opportunity to make a request, he would not miss it. Sixth young master, if it's possible, can you move some of the people here away? You said just now that Cambodia's territory is not very big, but it has a large population. With such a large population base, according to the previous regulations, the land is not enough to be distributed. You can't expect everyone to go into business, right? Although some factories will be built here in the future, it will still take time. During this time, many people will have nothing to do. I am worried that as time goes by. Tell me, how many people do you think it is appropriate to move? Yang Qindong waited for Sun Xiaoguang to report the data. When he opened his mouth, he went straight to the heart of the problem. Half. If you can move half of the population, I can guarantee that everyone here will have something to do. The situation will be completely stable and the speed of development in the future will be good. Finally, Sun Xiaoguang seized the opportunity and demanded an exorbitant price. He wanted to move 2 million people. 2 million. Yang Qindong did not expect Sun Xiaoguang's request to be so high. However, when he thought that Sun Xiaoguang was doing it for work, he did not refuse. Instead, he quickly nodded and said, "Okay, I will think of a way." Originally, he wanted to bargain, but he did not expect that the sixth young master would agree. Sun Xiaoguang was very happy and nodded repeatedly to express his gratitude. "You don't have to thank me. You are doing this to do a good job. I can find a way to move 2 million people out for you, but you have to remember that once this place is restored to its original state, there will still be outsiders who want to move in. At that time, you are not allowed to talk about conditions and difficulties." Yang Qindong gave a warning in advance. "Sixth young master, don't worry. I know." Sun Xiaoguang stood at attention and promised. Now that Cambodia was just established, it needed the help of others. In the future, when they became stronger, they would naturally help other regions. Sun Xiaoguang was very clear about this. Not long after, Sun Xiaoguang left happily, leaving Yang Qindong standing there looking at the map with his brows furrowed. Looking at his current forces, needless to say, Xi'an City was the place where the Han people gathered. People from Cambodia were not qualified to go there, so they could be excluded. Xi'an City had the smallest population, about 200,000. However, it was not rich in resources, so it was difficult to be self-sufficient. Therefore, he could not send a large number of people there. Vietnamese province already had a population of 3 million. It was not impossible to accommodate more people, but it would only increase the burden there. The same was true for Lao province, which had a population of 3 million. It also needed development, but it could not absorb more people. Since these forces could not do it, he could not throw the 2 million people that Sun Xiaoguang proposed to move into the sea. Wait, Yang Qindong's mind flashed an idea in an instant. Then his eyes fell on the sea. In a few breaths, layers of ideas formed in his mind. Then he punched the place marked on the map as Luzon Island with a smile in his eyes. In ancient times, Luzon Island was a small country called Luzon. Since the Song and Yuan dynasties, China's merchant ships often came here to trade. China's ancient books called it Little Luzon. There were special articles in the East and Western studies, and Ming history, foreign biographies. In the third year of the Ming Yongle dynasty 1405, the eunuch of the three guarantees, Zheng He, led a huge fleet to Luzon. He was appointed as the governor of Luzon by the Yongle Emperor. He was in charge of the country's politics, economy, military, and culture. He served for 20 years, 1405 to 1424. During this period, Su spared no effort to promote the Chinese culture. He implemented the rule of Confucianism and benevolence. He spread the advanced technology of agriculture, fishing, industry, and commerce in southern Min. He promoted shipbuilding, textile, pottery, tea, and other industries, making outstanding contributions to the social stability, economic development, and cultural prosperity of Luzon. Today, Luzon Island was still considered one of the vassal states of the Great Ming Dynasty. After the north and south were clearly separated, their strength was greatly reduced. In addition, they had forbidden the sea for many years. They had lost their original deterrence to Luzon Island. Luzon Island had become an isolated place, so why not occupy it for their own use? In fact, in 1450, the Arab merchant Said Abu Bakr had already established an Islamic regime in the southern part of Luzon Island. In the future, history would call this place the Philippines. Now they were only building their own forces on the southern island. Once they had a firm foothold, even if they didn't take over Luzon Island, other forces would also be tempted. Since that was the case, why should he be polite? The only thing he needed to worry about was that once the news of occupying Luzon Island spread back to the Ming Dynasty, would it affect the current relationship between the two sides? After all, Luzon Island was not far from the Ming Dynasty. The previous governor was appointed by the Ming Dynasty. If the news of the mercenaries occupying Luzon Island spread back, there would definitely be ministers who would raise doubts and bring trouble. Yang Qindong was not afraid of trouble, but it was always good to avoid trouble. Suddenly, Yang Qindong thought of something and asked Beta Persei, who was standing next to him. Beta Persei, I remember that we seem to have captured 20 large and medium-sized warships from Spain, right? Yes, young master. Those warships are very different from our warships. They have been sent to the shipyard in Cheng City for research. Beta Persei didn't know what was going on, but he still answered truthfully. Very good. Send a telegram to Commander Gao Xiong immediately. Tell him that I want to see him and ask him to come quickly. Yang Qindong nodded. Learning from each other's strengths to make up for one's weaknesses was what he taught the technicians in Cheng City. They were able to combine it with reality, which made him very pleased. Of course, he was even happier about the great use these 20 warships would bring to him. Beta Persei sent the telegram. 3 days later, Commander Gao Xiong rushed all the way from the sea to the port of Kampot. Then he rode all the way to the palace of Cambodia and saw Yang Qindong. Chapter 931. As soon as the two sides met, Yang Qindong pointed to the Luzon Island area on the sand table and asked Gao Xiong, "How is it? Do you have the confidence to conquer this place in one bite?" Gao Xiong, who looked at the sand table, was surprised. "Luzon Island?" "Yes, it's Luzon Island." Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Gao Xiong did not answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a moment before replying, "Sixth young master, our people have landed on this island more than once. We are very clear about the situation inside. Their defense is very weak. There is no problem in taking them down. However, there are many Han people there and they have a close relationship with the Great Ming Dynasty. If we attack them, I'm afraid." Gao Xiong did not continue, but the meaning was very clear. If they attacked Luzon Island, it would cause dissatisfaction from the Great Ming Dynasty. Now all the supply and demand of the first city had to pass through the land of Baiming. Once the relationship was strained, there would be no benefits between them. It doesn't matter. Times have changed. With our current strength, we can't launch an attack on the southern Baiming dynasty, but we can still wipe out some of the forces in the periphery. Besides, this time we don't have to use the banner of mercenaries. You know that your 3rd Sea Division captured 20 Spanish ships before, right? Yang Qindong only gave a slight hint, but Gao Xiong immediately understood the meaning behind it. He immediately said, "Sixth young master, you want to arrange them to attack Luzon Island? Oh, I understand. Please rest assured, sixth young master. I will prepare it immediately. I promise that no one will know about it. This is our intention." Good. Commander Gao, this time we have dealt with the Spanish ships. I believe that it won't be long before they send more people. In addition, the Portuguese ships are still wandering in this area. No matter how good the things are, it won't be enough for so many people to share it. What's more, this young master has never thought of sharing with them. Even if one day the conditions permit, we will go out and occupy more places, so the construction of the navy is not waiting for us. Just one army is not enough. Does the sixth young master mean that he wants to form an army? Gao Xiong was smart and he immediately understood the hidden meaning behind those words. Yes. Next they would need to form another army, but there would be more armies in the future. In the future, when the armies were combined, they would still need to form a division. There was still a long way to go. As for you, you have to be prepared to shoulder the heavy burden. After we take down Luzon Island, we will establish the Navy headquarters. At that time you will be the first deputy commander. Yang Qindong patted Gao Xiong's shoulder. Gao Xiong was steady, had a strong view of the big picture and was good at commanding. He was someone who could shoulder heavy responsibilities. Hearing this grand plan, Gao Xiong felt his blood boil. He stood at attention and said, "Sixth young master, don't worry. I'll go back and prepare immediately." At the same time, there will be a selection of Navy soldiers in Resin City. In fact, we have been doing this kind of work, but because the number of soldiers we need is limited, we didn't do it with great fanfare. But it's not a problem to form an army in a short time. Very good. At least the candidate for the commander of the second army, in the name of the Navy headquarters, let me have a look. Yang Qindong did what he said and put the task of forming the second army on the agenda. In Yang Qindong's view, if he wanted to expand his strength, it was not enough to just do it on land. In addition, the Eastern world had been exposed and could face all kinds of unexpected events or even provocations at any time. The expansion of the Navy was also necessary. Gao Xiong left. Only 10 days later, 10 warships with red, yellow and red rectangular flags sailed on the sea and went straight in the direction of Luzon Island. It seemed that this was just a simple voyage, but no one knew that all the officers and soldiers of the 1st Sea Division were curled up on these 10 ships, giving a very crowded feeling. This time it was the 1st Sea Division that received the task. This was also Gao Xiong's idea. Since the Navy was going to establish a second army, then who would be the commander of the 1st Sea Division? As the commander of the 1st Sea Division and the first deputy commander of the Navy headquarters, of course he had to express his opinion. The commander of the 1st Sea Division, Yu Guang, was one of the first people to follow him. He was also one of the first people to follow the sixth young master. He had the ability and qualifications, so he chose this person as the candidate for the commander of the 2nd Sea Division. This time, the capture of Luzon Island gave him an opportunity to show his face in front of the sixth young master. Yu Guang naturally grasped the opportunity given to him by the army commander. After receiving the order, he and the 4 regiment commanders of the 1st Sea Division, as well as the staff officers, repeatedly studied Luzon Island and formulated what they thought was the most perfect battle plan. When the 10 ships with the Spanish flag arrived at the northernmost dock of Luzon Island on the pretext of trade, the 4th Sea Division was responsible for controlling the port. The 1st, 2nd and 3rd Sea Division launched a lightning raid from 3 different directions and soon controlled most of the areas around the Kakol River. The Luzon government, which originally only had 50,000 soldiers and was still spread out for defense, fell in just 5 days. The already declining Governor Chinrong was captured alive and the entire Luzon Island became a new territory for the mercenaries. On the second day after Luzon changed its flag, a large number of ships with the flag of 5 stars suddenly appeared. They surrounded the 10 ships with the flag of Spain, and after a fierce battle, they destroyed them. The main commander, Miguel, and the deputy commander, Cruz, were captured and then taken away in public. This scene was witnessed by many merchants at the northern port of Luzon. At this point, the plan was successfully completed. Yang Qindong used the 2 captured enemy generals and the 10 ships to act and reasonably occupy Luzon Island. They had defeated the Western powers and returned safely to Luzon Island. When the news spread, even if the Southern and Southern Ming dynasties knew about it, they could not say anything. As for why the mercenaries did not leave and instead sent troops to guard the place, it was easier to explain. After all, this place had become the target of other countries. They only stayed to better protect this place. After Luzon Island became Yang Qindong's new power, they expanded the northern dock according to his request and renamed it Port Luzon. At the same time, a new city, Luzon City, was built on the island. Li Sheng, who was recommended by Yu Qian, was the first city lord. Because the population of Luzon Island was not large at that time, only a little more than 1 million. In order to strengthen the construction here and prosper the economy, 2 million people were transferred from Cambodia. At this point, Yang Qindong had fulfilled his promise to Governor Sun Xiaoguang. After Luzon Island became a member of Yang Qindong's sphere of influence, they had successfully taken control of the Ming dynasty's South China Sea. Relying on Ryukyu Island, Luzon Island and the docks and harbors of Yunnan province, they had formed a pocket above the sea. Without their consent, any ships of any power that entered this place might face a heavy blow from 3 sides. The mission of capturing Luzon Island was successfully completed. The time came to May of 1454 AD. At this time the second wife, Qiao Yin, was about to give birth. Yang Qindong gave up all military affairs and returned to Chinan City to accompany Qiao Yin, who was about to give birth, to wait for the birth of his first child. Yang Qindong stopped and the provinces under his power also settled down. Those that should be developed continued to develop, and those that should be stabilized seized the time to stabilize. The Navy headquarters also passed a resolution to build the Second Sea Army, appointing Yue Guang as the commander. There were 4, 5 and 6 naval divisions under his command, with a total of more than 26,000 officers. At the same time it was announced that from today onwards, the mercenaries would be renamed the 5-Star Army, and it was announced to the world. The mercenaries changed their name to the 5-Star Army, which was definitely a big deal. However, there were not many people who really paid attention to this at the moment. Everything was following Yang Qindong's attack on the Phnom Penh dynasty. The various forces also took the opportunity to seek opportunities to seize their own benefits. Shortly after learning the news that the mercenaries launched an attack on the Phnom Penh dynasty, the king of Minzhuang, Zhou Xian, proclaimed himself King Nanming and announced to the world. Not long after he sent troops to Yunnan, where King Mu Bin of Shiping was located. For King Nanming Zhou Xian, his location was not satisfactory. To the north and east there was Baiming's army, to the west there was King Mu's army, and to the south there was the mercenaries' territory of Yunnan province. He was surrounded on all sides and there was not even a safe way out. Once something happened, wouldn't his life be in danger? In order to solve this problem he was bound to kill his way out. After thinking about it he set his target on Yunnan, where King Shiping was located. This was also a last resort. Relatively speaking, among the 3 forces that surrounded him, King Shiping was the easiest to bully. In order to achieve the goal of one hit, Zhou Xian mobilized 100,000 troops and gave a heavy blow to Mu Bin, who was under Yunnan, without warning. Unfortunately, because the news was leaked in advance, he did not achieve the goal of one hit. He only managed to severely injure Mu Bin. However, just as King Nanming wanted to take down the entire Yunnan, Nanming sent troops. For a time King Nanming, who had to fight on both sides, quickly changed from offense to defense. The battle was in a state of stalemate for a while. At this time the Vietnamese general under the mercenaries, Hong Jin, led his troops out of Lang Son and watched the 3 sides fight. Hong Jin's appearance not only meant that Yang Qindong behind him was paying attention to this matter, but also that he had to do a very important thing, which was to take care of the people who were injured during and after the war. As long as they were Han people, they would take them in and arrange their lives for them. Compared to the last time when he spent 10 million taels of silver to buy Baiming, Yang Qindong did not spend money this time. Instead he just picked people up. Facts had already proven that every time a piece of land was occupied, a large number of Han people would be needed to occupy it. Although after the last incident Yang Qindong still had more than 3 million Han people in his hands, compared to the expansion of his forces, this number was clearly not enough. Chapter 932. Restoring the glory of the Han people and bringing them to the top of the world had always been Yang Qindong's life goal that had never changed. In order to achieve this goal he needed more Han people. He needed to spread them everywhere like seeds. Seeking more Han people to join him in the war was a very good way. The mercenaries began to take in the Han people and arranged for their food, clothing, housing and transportation. Under the arrangement of the 2 major intelligence agencies, this matter quickly spread throughout the battlefield. For a time, many Han people who had been affected by the war and had no home to return to seemed to have found the light. They thought of ways to rush to Langshan from where they originally were. They knew that once they could get there all the problems in front of them would be solved. Their lives would have hope again and their lives would be guaranteed. The mercenaries' approach quickly attracted the attention of Emperor Nanming, Prince Nanming, and Prince Shiping, who were fighting. When they saw that they were not spending money to buy people, but relying on the war to recruit people, they naturally disagreed wholeheartedly. They tried their best to stop them and even maliciously spread some rumors that once they reached Xianxia, it would be difficult for them to survive. It was better to continue to stay in their hometown. The three forces actually reached an agreement on this matter, and the impact was naturally not small. Some people who originally did not want to leave their hometown naturally chose to stay. However, when the war continued, the people found that they had land but could not farm. When they had money but could not buy food, the thought of leaving arose. However, due to the uncertainty of the government, they began to use various methods. Some sneaked away, some spent money to buy passage from the soldiers. In short, they had to leave this place. They had to leave this place where they could lose their lives at any time in the war. As a result, there would be people rushing from all directions to the entrance of Xianxia every day. General Hong Jin had prepared a large amount of food and was waiting for them. As long as these people appeared here, they would be safe. It was equivalent to being protected by him. Since Hong Jin was backed by a powerful mercenary group, none of the three forces dared to provoke him. This place had really become a paradise, a safe place far away from the flames of war. For a time, the number of people under Yang Qindong's influence began to slowly increase. Every few days, General Hong Jin would arrange for soldiers to escort these Han people to the seaside wharf in Yunnan province. Naturally, there would be a naval battle waiting for them there. They would be sent to the safest place, Xichen City. Zhu Qiu and Zhu Qian of the Ying sect were truly brothers. The southern Ming Empire had already started the war, and the northern Ming Empire was also preparing for war. Dai Zong issued an edict to change the name of the northern Ming Empire's territory to Liaodong. At the same time, he recruited 100,000 cavalrymen from there for the expedition to the west. At the same time, they also bought war horses in Liaodong. They wanted to build a strong cavalry force to the world. However, the number of war horses in the Liaodong region was limited, and many of them had to be purchased from various forces in the grassland. If one were to talk about who was the strongest in the Mongol Empire and who had the most horses, it would undoubtedly be First City. Shiqing was built by Yang Qindong with a lot of effort. In terms of personal effort, it was far more than Xichen City. For Xichen City, he only took out a lot of things from the warehouse and put forward some feasible suggestions. It was far from Shiqing, which was built by him alone. Shiqing was the first Siamese city built by Yang Qindong on the grassland. It had political significance and symbolic significance. It was also the economic and cultural center that he built personally. It was a model city. Not only did it have the largest commercial street in the grassland, but it was also the largest vegetable base, grain foundation and war horse breeding base in the grassland. As early as when the city was being built, Yang Qindong spent a lot of money to buy a lot of stallions at a high price. He also hired many experienced horse breeders to breed and cultivate the war horses. After 2 years, there were finally results. The number of war horses began to increase, and Shiqing became the largest war horse breeding base in the grassland. In fact, the breeding of war horses was not difficult. As long as there were talents and materials, it could be built. Moreover, the climate of the grassland was suitable for the growth of war horses. However, other people could not do this. It was not that they were not determined enough, but that they did not invest enough. Just like when the Tang Empire was established, because they invested enough, the war horses were quickly cultivated, which led to the defeat of the Turks. Now, with strong financial resources and the existence of the mercenary army, there was no need to worry about anyone targeting them. The scale of the war horse breeding base was getting bigger and bigger, so Beiming had no choice but to target them. Naturally, even if Beiming had such thoughts, he would not dare to openly snatch it. According to the report of the Xian Mansion's chief soldier, Shi Wanshan, the combat strength of the mercenary army in the first city was very strong. Just the combat strength of a new army was daunting. Not to mention, there were more than 20,000 mercenary cavalry in the North Desert City, which was thousands of miles away from the first city. Once there was danger here, the other party would arrive in less than 3 days. If one wanted to snatch it by force, there would be no other result other than asking for trouble. Since they could not rob them, they could only consider spending money to buy them. However, Baiming's money was used on the training of millions of new soldiers and the development of guns and cannons. How much money would they have to buy war horses? Moreover, the price of a good war horse was not cheap. It must be said that there were indeed some talents in northern Ming. Soon there were ministers who proposed to buy horses on credit. For example, they were willing to use the future expenses of the mercenaries to offset the cost. There were also people who proposed to borrow money from the Yang family bank in northern Ming. Since businessmen could take a loan, why couldn't Baiming do it? These suggestions made Zhu Qiu, who was having a headache, overjoyed. He immediately agreed. On one hand, he arranged for Chief Eunuch Jin Ying to negotiate with the person in charge of the Yang family bank in the capital. On the other hand, he sent an urgent message to Deng Chong, who was guarding Xian City, to go to Shiqing City to negotiate. In short, no matter what method was used, as long as they could get the war horses, it would be a great achievement. In Zhu Qiu's view, he was the emperor of a country. Whatever he wanted, he would definitely get it. However, in front of the mercenary army, this thought was broken. In short, the mercenary army only recognized money and not people. Deng Chong was naturally rebuffed. City Lord Yu Mian's answer was very simple. Considering that they were all Han people and Yang Chendong was the Duke of Loyalty, they were not outsiders. The war horses could be sold to them, but they had to take out enough money. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. The Yang family bank was even simpler. You borrowed 5 million taels of silver from us last year and haven't returned a single cent. How can we lend you money now? This was not in line with the development of business and was not allowed. The two sides that had high hopes were both heavily damaged. This result made Zhu Qiu very depressed and angry. He felt that he had lost face. However, he did not have the courage of his ancestors and did not have the strength of his ancestors. Facing the mercenary army that was not weaker than them, he could not do anything. At this time, the North Korean envoy came to Baiming and came to pay tribute like in the past. All of this happened because of this tribute. In 1338 AD, the Goryeo king sent Li Qingge to attack the newer Gandusi region. Li Qingge took the chance to start a coup. In 1392 AD, Li Qingge deposed the Goryeo king and became the king himself. He changed the name of the country to North Korea and set the capital as Hanyang, modern Seoul. The North Korean dynasty promoted Confucianism and rejected Buddhism. Adopting the doctrine of the big picture towards the Great Ming, that is, pledging allegiance to the Great Ming. This was one of the reasons why Ming Taizu declared not to conquer the country. North Korea and the Great Ming dynasty were both non-conquering countries, but North Korea had a closer relationship with the Great Ming dynasty. This might be due to their geographical location. Since the establishment of North Korea, every king had to be recognized by the Great Ming dynasty before they could ascend the throne and be regarded as the legitimate ruler. The relationship between the two sides was so good that when North Korea sent an envoy to pay tribute, the Baiming emperor would give them face and meet him. This time was no different from the past. Zhu Qiu still wanted to meet the North Korean envoy as usual. The difference was that the envoy this time was not sent by the sixth king of North Korea, Li Hongwa. Instead, it was a subordinate of Li Hongwa's uncle, Lord Shoyang. At this time, North Korea was going through the Guiyujing disaster. The so-called Guiyujing disaster happened during the reign of Emperor Duanzong of North Korea. It was an incident where Emperor Duanzong's uncle, Lord Shoyang, usurped the throne in a coup. In essence, it was a matter of the North Korean royal family killing each other. The imperial court of the northern Ming dynasty had also received news from the secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard that they had sent there. However, considering that this was another country's internal affairs and that the northern Ming dynasty had many headaches, they did not pay much attention to it. Perhaps the Baiming imperial court already knew, or perhaps they did not know and did not care. In short, the current situation in North Korea was gradually becoming clear. Li Hongwa's faction had the upper hand. This time Zheng Linji, who came as a special envoy, was the person Li Hongwa valued the most. Zheng Linji had just been appointed by Li Hongwa before he came to Baiming. He was the leader of the North Korean Yi dynasty's highest administrative organization, the parliamentary government. He was at the first rank and was equivalent to the Prime Minister or Prime Minister of China. Sending such an important minister over was only for one thing. That was, once Li Meng completely defeated Li Hongxian, he would have a legitimate reason to request Northern Ming to make Li Meng the new king. Zhu Qiu, who was at the banquet, did not care about the North Korean matter. Perhaps in his opinion it was not a big deal. North Korea was just a small country and did not deserve his attention. However, Zheng Linji, who felt good about himself, did not think this way. When he came, Li Hongwa told him that in order to get Baiming's support he could do some things to show their existence. For example, the issue of mercenaries. Chapter 933. During the banquet, seeing that Dai Zong and Zhu Qiyu were not in high spirits, and even when they were drinking, Zheng Linji asked in a low voice, "Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, is there something bothering you? Why don't you tell me, maybe I can help you with some ideas." Zhu Qiyu raised his head slightly and sneered. He didn't mean to look down on North Korea, but he clearly looked down on North Korea. In his eyes, he never treated North Korea as a dish. If he couldn't solve the problem, what could the other party do? Zheng Linji didn't get angry when he saw Zhu Qiyu's disregard. He knew very well that his identity couldn't enter the other party's eyes. It's just that he came with a mission, so even if he didn't want to talk he had to. Seeing that Zhu Qiyu didn't intend to speak again, he took the initiative to say, "Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, I guess that you have a headache because of the warhorse?" Zhu Qiyu, who didn't care at first, became more focused this time, and when he looked at Zheng Linji he became more formal. Seeing that he had successfully attracted the other party's attention, Zheng Linji was happy and continued, "If it's because of this matter, I really have a way." This time, Zhu Qiyu was even more surprised. He didn't expect that a small vassal state's minister would have some knowledge. If it was in the past maybe he wouldn't care, but now with a desperate mentality he nodded and said, "Okay, then let's go to the palace after the banquet." "Thank you, Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty." Zheng Linji nodded happily. He was excited that he had taken the first step. Thinking that this time he could get the attention of the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor, then there would be no twists and turns and problems when Li Ji was conferred the title of king in the future. The banquet seemed to be particularly enthusiastic because of Zheng Linji's unexpected action. Especially the emperor, whose face had been ugly for a long time, seemed to have forgotten his troubles at this moment, and there was a smile on his face. The other ministers didn't know the reason, so they could only make various guesses in their hearts. After the banquet, Zheng Linji was still sent back to the relay station by the carriage. However, the others did not know that he had already gotten off the carriage halfway and was heading straight for the palace. The mercenaries, or rather the five-star army, were getting stronger and stronger. Zhu Qiyu felt a strong sense of crisis. Therefore he didn't dare to trust anyone in a meeting like this. He just let the chief eunuch Jin Ying take care of everything. When he saw Zheng Linji in the palace, Zhu Qiyu's expression had returned to its usual calm. "Greetings to the great emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty." As soon as he entered the side hall, Zheng Linji knelt on the ground with a pious expression. "Envoy, there's no need to be so courteous. Why don't you talk about what you discussed with me earlier?" Zhu Qiyu stretched out his hand and gestured for them to rise. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Zheng Linji slowly got up from the ground and explained his plan. If they want war horses, the best place to get them is naturally in the beginning city. Unfortunately, they have already forgotten who gave them everything they have. There is no land under the heavens. The actions of the five-star army are indeed rebellious. "Okay, Envoy, you don't have to judge these. Let's talk about your plan," Zhu Qiyu said with displeasure. The five-star army had already disobeyed his orders. This was naturally a provocation to the imperial power. He was not happy, so why would he bother others to talk about it in front of him? After Zheng Linji was reminded of this, his expression showed a bit of nervousness. He knew that he had to get some solid goods after all. Otherwise, he was afraid that the great Ming Emperor would drive him away. "Your Majesty, although there are many war horses in the beginning city and they can even be said to be strong, they have a fatal flaw. That is, everything they need must be transported by sea. As long as we can cut off this route, it is equivalent to holding down his weak spot. At that time, won't Your Majesty be in control? Sea route." Listening to this proposal that was not very new, Zhu Qiyu shook his head with a trace of disappointment on his face. "Envoy, you are wrong. The leader of the five-star army is the loyal Duke of the Great Ming Dynasty. Why would I fight with him? Besides, the Great Ming Dynasty has been forbidden to go to sea for many years. There are no more ships. Your Majesty doesn't have any, but North Korea does. As long as your majesty agrees, this matter can be done by us. When the time comes, you can push all the responsibility to us. When the 5-star army agrees to your majesty's request, we will remove the blockade. In this way they can't do anything about it. Zheng Linji said with a complacent look. These words were not said casually. It was the result of a long investigation by the North Korean Navy. Every time the ships of the 5-star army would pass through their waters. After observation they found that the other party seemed to be very careless. Every time they only saw transport ships and did not see any escort ships. The number of ships of the 5-star army would not be many at a time, only about 30 ships. This strength was really not in the eyes of the North Korean Navy. If they suddenly attacked, there was a 90% chance that they would sink and cause heavy damage. Once this supply line was cut off by the sea, the position of the 5-star army would be awkward. At this time, Northern Ming was the mediator as one of the great powers of the Celestial Empire. Naturally, they could appear with a condescending attitude and propose some conditions for the exchange. After all, North Korea was a vassal state of Beiming. They would listen to them. With just one word they could restore the sea route. For the sake of the 5-star army on the grassland they had to pay some price. Zhu Qiu wanted to think about these things again in his mind. Then he looked at Zheng Linji with a little more warmth in his eyes. Envoy Zheng, I heard that the situation in North Korea is a little unstable now. Replying to the great emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, it's just a small problem. Our King Li Gu will be able to solve it soon. Zheng Linji knew that the critical moment had arrived. Wait for the problem over there to be solved. I, Beiming, will confer Li Gu as the king of North Korea. Zhu Qiu spat out, giving the other party a guarantee. This was exactly what Zheng Linji wanted. He immediately knelt on the ground again. Long live the great Ming dynasty's emperor. You may rise. Zhu Qiu said in a good mood. Finally, there was an opportunity to curb the development of the 5-star army. Moreover, he didn't have to do anything himself. In other words, if any problems occurred during this period he could naturally stay out of it. He would definitely agree to something that didn't require him to do anything and could still benefit from. Zheng Linji left happily. The next morning he hurriedly left Beiming's capital and rushed back to North Korea. An operation to repair the sea route of the 5-star army's transport ships immediately began preparations. Because only Zhu Qiu, Chief Eunuch Jin Ying and Zheng Linji were present during the secret meeting, this matter didn't leak out in Beiming. The capital of North Korea, Seoul, also known as Hanyang. In 1392, the Ri family established the Joseon dynasty and moved the capital to Yangzhou in 1394. In order to express his admiration for the Han dynasty, not the Han dynasty, and his determination to serve the Han dynasty wholeheartedly, Ri Chingge wrote a letter to the Hongwu Emperor, Zhu Yuanzhang, requesting that Yangzhou be renamed Seoul. The Guiyu crisis was coming to an end. The power of the 6th king Ri Hongwu was being weakened step by step. Ri Hongwu's uncle Lord Shouyang had the upper hand. Now Zheng Linji had rushed back from Beiming and brought the support of the Emperor of Beiming. The next step was to replace him. Li Hongwu, who had already seized the military and political power, now had the entire Korean navy in his hands. After hearing Zheng Linji's report he summoned another important minister, Han Mingjin, to discuss the matter of the navy intercepting the 5-star army's transport ships. Han Mingjin, born in 1415, was a Korean and was a famous minister in the early years of the Joseon dynasty. He helped Li Hongwu plan the Guiyu crisis and finally seized the throne. He was called Zhang Liang by Li Hongwu. The three of them discussed the important matter in the study. After an hour Han Mingjin left first. He had become the commander of this operation. Now he had to make many preparations for the sea operation. Seeing him leave in a hurry, Zheng Linji walked out with Li Hongwu. Lord Han Mingjin doesn't seem to agree with us taking action against the 5-star army. You still sent him to command the battle at this time. Will there be any accidents? Wherever there were people there would be fighting. Korea's territory was not large and its population was not large, but when it came to fighting it was very experienced. Just like Zheng Linji and Han Mingjin. Although they were both Li Hongwu's subordinates, they still disliked each other and fought among themselves. Li Hongwu was a smart person. He naturally saw these things but he did not say anything to stop it. It was not that he did not have the ability to stop it, but he was happy to see it happen. He needed a balance. This might be a common method used by the emperor to control his subordinates. There won't be any meaning. Mingjin is just worried that the 5-star army will take revenge on us. But this time we have Baiming's support. How would they dare to act recklessly? Since he has taken on this responsibility, he will naturally do a good job. This time we just need to wait for good news. Li Hongwa said confidently. Perhaps he was confident in the plan this time, or perhaps he was confident in the Korean Navy. Or perhaps he simply looked down on the 5-star army's strength. It was only a force that originated from the great Ming dynasty's duke. Could it really scare him? He really did not know what the Baiming emperor was thinking. He couldn't even control a subject. It was no wonder that the great Ming dynasty was divided. Of course, Li Hongwa did not know that he was looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. He also did not know that his stupid arrogance had caused him to provoke an opponent. The entire Korea would be completely destroyed because of his actions. Chapter 934. As usual, a fleet of 30 ships was passing through the Korean Strait between North Korea and the Japanese Empire. The 5-star flag hanging high in the sky showed their identity. Chu Gang, the second commander of the 3rd Division, was looking ahead with his binoculars from time to time. Chu Gang was originally just a battalion commander. He worked his way up from the bottom of the ranks. A while ago, when he was dealing with the Kim Bien dynasty, he made a great contribution and was promoted to the commander of the 2nd Division. This was also his first time escorting and transporting supplies as a commander. Now that he had become a regiment commander, his status was different from before. The phrase "stand higher and see further" was exactly what he was feeling at this moment. Looking ahead, North Korean ships would appear in the Korean Strait from time to time, which made him very unhappy. These annoying flies. I didn't like them when I passed by here before. I will find a chance to teach them a lesson. He had been on this transport route several times before, but not as a commander. Even when he saw North Korean ships staring at them, he just didn't like it. But now he was a commander. According to the rules of the Cold Front, he could now submit a report to the 6th Young Master. He decided to finish the mission and go back to explain the dangers of North Korea. Although he didn't think that the other party would dare to do anything to him, the feeling of being watched was very uncomfortable. The fleet continued to pass through the strait. The number of North Korean ships was increasing, reaching more than 200 ships. Chu Gang, who was standing in the command room, felt a little strange. What's going on? How come there are so many North Korean ships this time? They won't dare to attack us. A staff officer next to him answered aloud. Anyone could hear the arrogance in his voice. What was the Cold Front? It represented the strongest combat power. So far, except for the 1st Cavalry Division, which was personally appointed by the 6th Young Master, they didn't think highly of any other army. For the staff officer's words, everyone nodded in agreement, including Chu Gang. They didn't think that anyone would dare to attack them. Or rather, someone dared to do it, but it definitely shouldn't be the North Korean Navy that they had always looked down on. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, more and more North Korean ships appeared. And they came within 100 meters of the ship under the flag that they wanted the mercenaries to stop the ship for inspection. No matter what, this was the other party's territory. Although they had never been inspected before, they actually had the right to make such a request. In the face of this reasonable request, for a time, many ships couldn't help but slow down, some even stopped. Oh no, they might really attack. Immediately send out the signal flag to inform the other ships to pass through quickly. At the same time, prepare the cannons to fire. Chu Gang quickly reacted after a scream in his heart, especially when he saw the North Korean ships accelerating towards his fleet through the binoculars. The bad feeling grew stronger and stronger. After the order was given, the flag bearers quickly rushed to the bow of the ship to convey the commander's orders. At this moment, the North Korean ships that were approaching also began to move. They first accelerated and rushed to the side of the 5-star army's fleet. Then, in a planned manner, 7 or 8 ships surrounded one of the 5-star army's ships. The deck of the ship was filled with North Korean soldiers holding bows and arrows. When the distance was less than 100 meters, the bows and arrows rained down like rain. The long-prepared attack began. They didn't prepare, or rather they didn't think that a small North Korean would dare to attack them. The moment they met the enemy, the 5-star army suffered a loss. A few of the 5-star army officers that were prepared to shout were shot by arrows, either dead or injured. This was a battle that they weren't prepared for, and it was also an unequal battle. Since they weren't prepared and the number of ships was 8-1, the 2nd Regiment of the 3rd Sea Division fell into a difficult situation as soon as they met the enemy. Dozens of officers and soldiers were caught off guard and shot by the arrows. They either fell to the ground or fell into the hands of the soldiers. The 5-star army, which only had 2 battalions guarding the ships, fell into a disadvantageous position. Considering the fact that they had to escort more supplies, the 2nd Regiment didn't send out all of its members. The 1st Regiment only sent out 2 battalions of the 5 battalions. Even with the addition of the commander and some officers, there were only about 800 people. Divided into 30 ships, there were less than 30 soldiers on each ship. The North Korean Navy sent out more than 200 ships and more than 10,000 soldiers. This kind of disparity, in addition to the fact that one side came prepared and the other was unprepared, the battle instantly became one-sided. After the North Korean ships gained the upper hand, they quickly began to close in. When the distance between them was less than 20 meters, a large wooden plank that had been prepared beforehand was thrown out, forming a temporary passage between the 2 ships. Fire the cannons. Commander Zhou Xian on the main ship saw that the situation was getting worse and worse. He first took a gun from the staff officer beside him and shouted. At this moment his eyes were red. The fleet was under attack, and as the commander here, if he couldn't solve the problem, then whether he returned or not, only death would await him. Whether it was for his duty or for the dignity of Lung Feng, he couldn't afford to hesitate at this moment. Commander, our ships are too close to the enemy's ships. If we fire now, we might hurt our own people. When the cannoneer heard the order, his face was first shocked, then he said with difficulty, "Don't worry so much, the ships that stopped have no chance of leaving. Even if the soldiers die, we can't let them and their supplies fall into the hands of the North Koreans. Quickly fire the cannons." The situation was so tense that Zhou Xian didn't have time to think about so many problems. What he needed to do now was to fire the cannons at the North Korean Navy and then take advantage of the chaos to buy time for the other ships to retreat. Following the commander's order, the cannons sounded and landed on a North Korean ship, causing a huge explosion and flames to rise into the sky. At the same time, the soldiers of Lung Feng on the various ships began to fire back. Bullets flew out and landed in the North Korean Navy's camp, causing the soldiers to fall one after another. A chaotic battle had begun. Cannon fire came one after another. At this moment, Zhou Xian didn't want to save ammunition anymore. In order to turn the situation around, what he needed to do now was to use up all his ammunition in the shortest time possible to deal a heavy blow to the North Korean Navy and provide cover for the other ships to leave. It was obvious that it was impossible to continue forward. Commander Zhou Xian gave another order, so the ships turned around and sailed back to the sea. At this moment, it was impossible to complete the transportation mission. The only thing they could do was to minimize the losses. The bullets and arrows collided. If this was on land with the advantages of guns, they could definitely fight back and retreat at the same time, causing heavy damage to the enemy. However, this was the sea. The space on the ship was limited and there weren't many places to dodge. Many soldiers were forced to retreat to a corner and were shot to death by the arrows. The battle had only lasted for half an hour, but the soldiers on 3 ships had already been killed and the ships had been taken over by the North Korean Navy. Concentrate the last of the cannons and sink those 3 ships. With a face full of joy, Zhou Xian gave the order to fire his own ships. Since the ships had already been taken over by the enemy, they couldn't snatch them back. Now they could only sink them and not let the enemy gain any benefits. At the same time, order the other ships to retreat quickly. Don't fight. Tell the soldiers that we will definitely take revenge today, but for now we should immediately leave the battlefield. Zhou Xian's eyes were red as he gritted his teeth and ordered the fleet to retreat. Orders were issued one after another and cannonballs flew down, hitting the 3 ships that were about to become their spoils of war. One of the cannonballs unfortunately landed on another ship that was retreating, and a raging fire seemed to illuminate this part of the sea. From the start of the battle to the end, it was less than 4 hours. The 5-star army had lost 4 warships and more than 500 soldiers were dead or injured. This kind of loss was more than 50% of the naval battle. It was the greatest loss since the establishment of the Cold Front Navy. Zhou Gang, who had retreated far away, stood at the back of the ship. Looking at the huge fire in the distance, his eyes were red as he swore that he would definitely take revenge for today. He would definitely make the North Koreans pay a heavy price for what they had done today. Han Mingjin stood on the largest North Korean ship and looked at the 5-star army ships that were slowly retreating. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Sir, should we send someone to chase after them?" A marine general came forward and asked. "No need. Our mission is to prevent them from passing through here. Now that we have achieved our goal, we can retreat." Han Mingjin shook his head and rejected the suggestion to continue chasing. Then a trace of worry appeared on his face. A power that even the great Ming dynasty had to be wary of, and now they had taken the initiative to provoke them. What kind of consequences and effects would there be? Han Mingjin didn't dare to think about it, but his gut feeling told him that they seemed to have done something wrong this time. They seemed to have to pay a price for it. However, no matter how much Han Mingjin thought about it, he would never have thought that this would be the beginning of their North Korean destruction. From now on, there would be no North Korea in the world. Zhou Gang took advantage of the advanced nature of the ships and quickly left the battlefield. After leaving the Korean Straits with 26 ships, he reported the details of what had happened to the Navy headquarters in the form of a telegram. At the same time, he requested to be dealt with. The Navy headquarters telegram room was also in chaos after receiving this telegram. Vice Commander Gao Xiong, who was in charge, didn't believe the contents of the telegram. He didn't believe that someone would take the initiative to make an enemy of the 5-star army. Chapter 935. Call back immediately and confirm if it's true. Hurry. Although Gao Xiong knew that the officers under him would not have the guts to make a false report, he still needed to confirm it. Soon the verified telegram was sent back. Zhou Gang used his head as a guarantee. Gao Xiong knew that things would not go wrong. He quickly said to the adjutant beside him, "Let's go to the palace." At this moment, the palace of Xianxia city was extremely tense. It was only because the second madam was about to give birth. According to the authoritative doctor, Xiao Yanmei, the child should be born in a few days. Because of this, the atmosphere in the palace was extremely tense. When someone walked past the second madam's palace, their footsteps would be much lighter, as if they were afraid that they would make a noise and disturb the madam. That would be too great a crime. Yang Chendong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, also showed the nervousness of being a father at this moment. In both his previous life and this life, he had experienced a lot of bullets and seen countless moments of life and death. However, this was the first time he had his own child. People were always full of respect for the unknown. At this moment, he was no exception. Nervousness and apprehension had been wrapping around him. Beta Persei changed his usual carefree attitude and carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and whispered, "Young master, Deputy Commander Gao is here. He said that he has something important to say to you." Yang Chendong, who was already a little nervous, frowned after hearing Beta Persei's words. No one did not know what time it was, but Gao Xiong still came. This was enough to show the importance of reporting. "Okay, tell him to wait in the side hall." In the side hall, Gao Xiong received the telegram from Zhou Gang and handed it to Yang Chendong. Then he lowered his head and said, "Sixth young master, I have sent a second telegram to confirm the authenticity of this matter." What a bold North Korean navy. We did not go to find trouble with them, but they dared to find trouble with us. They really don't know what's good for them. Yang Chendong read the report. After seeing that 4 ships had sunk and nearly 500 soldiers had died, he suddenly slammed the table. His eyes were filled with a terrifying light. "Yes, I am also responsible for this matter. Our Marine headquarters has never paid attention to this problem. We always thought that no one would dare to do anything to us, so we were careless and gave the enemy an opportunity. I am sorry." Seeing that Yang Chendong was angry, Gao Xiong quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. The Marine headquarters is indeed responsible. Some people have been blinded by victory. This incident is a wake-up call for us. Underestimating the opponent at any time is a fatal behavior. You have to use this incident to reflect on yourselves. Yes, sixth young master. I will reflect on my actions. Knowing that Yang Qindong was greatly dissatisfied with this matter, Gao Xiong needed to express his stance. You don't need to reflect on yourself. This time, everyone is responsible. After you go back, immediately hold a meeting and carry out self-reflection activities. Then prepare for battle. Yang Qindong thought back to the last time he returned to Chosen City from Haijin. He saw the North Korean Navy in action. At that time he felt that this was a problem, but he didn't expect the problem to erupt so quickly. Gao Xiong left quickly after receiving the order. Yang Qindong sat in the side hall and did not leave immediately. He still had to think about a problem. He had no contact with North Korea and there was no hatred. Why did the other party choose to attack him? This did not make sense. Beta Persei, send a telegram to Yang San and ask him to send someone to find out which force North Korea has been in contact with recently. Also, let Yang San inform the North Korean Security Department and ask them to arrange the troops there. Conduct a detailed investigation of the strength of the army and report it to me. Yes, young master. Beta Persei agreed and turned to do it. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, threw this matter to the back of his mind and strode towards the backyard of the palace. The Cold Front Navy was raided by the North Korean Navy, and it was said that they suffered heavy losses. The news quickly spread, and then the 6th Division commanders of the Navy put down the things at hand and went straight to the Navy headquarters. In the headquarters, the division commanders arrived one by one, and then there were voices shouting to go to war and avenge the Navy. Gao Xiong explained to everyone that the 6th young master already knew about this matter, and all they had to do was wait for orders. At the same time he called everyone together for a meeting to discuss which division or army should take action to wash away the shame of the Navy. Just as the Navy headquarters was boiling, a sharp cry came from the palace of Haijin. Yang Qindong's eldest daughter was born. It had a chubby face, 2 rows of curved eyebrows, a pair of big bright eyes, a small nose, a pair of bodhisattva ears, a small chubby mouth and a round double chin under the mouth. Her hands were chubby and her fingers were short and thick. She was very cute. Carefully hugging the eldest daughter in his arms, Yang Qindong couldn't close his mouth from smiling. Taking this opportunity, the eldest Madame Hu Yen came forward to ask for the name of the child. Yang Qindong had long been prepared. Previously, Zhao Yanmei had also said that it was very likely that this child would be a girl, so he said, her name will be Yang Jia, which means pure and kind. Her nickname will be Lele and she will be happy for the rest of her life. Lele's voice made the palace really lively for a while. Yang Qindong also received the congratulations of the officials. On the 7th day of Lele's birth, he came from the palace to the Navy headquarters. At this time, the Navy headquarters was full of officers, and there were 2 generals with gold stars on their shoulders. They were the 1st Sea Army Commander Gao Xiong and the 2nd Sea Army Commander Yu Guang. You're all here, then sit down for the meeting. After Yang Qindong's eyes scanned the crowd, he sat down at the head of the table. The other officers, led by Gao Xiong, also sat down in their chairs. Each of them was in a dignified position, standing in a military posture. Is Zhou Gang here? Tell me about the situation. After sitting down, Yang Qindong took the lead and said. As he spoke, Zhou Gang, who was in the last row of the meeting room, stood up. He was just a captain, and according to the rules he was not qualified to participate in such a high-level meeting. It was only because he was a participant in this battle that he made an exception. 6th young master, the situation is like this. Although he had reported the ins and outs of the situation more than once since returning to Crimson City, this was the first time he reported in front of the 6th young master. After a quarter of an hour, Zhou Gang finished his report. In the end he asked for instructions as a participant. 6th young master, this battle was completely unprepared. Many of our comrades died miserably. Facing the enemy who was already prepared, some of them did not even have the chance to shoot. But even so, none of them retreated. They fought with their fists, feet and even teeth. They were very brave. Okay, I understand. You can sit down. Yang Qindong looked at Zhou Gang with appreciation and nodded. Because of Zhou Gang's seat, the conference room quickly fell into silence again. But everyone's eyes fell on Yang Qindong at this moment. Obviously they were all waiting for an order, an opportunity to take revenge on North Korea. Not letting everyone wait for long, under Yang Qindong's signal, Beta Persei first wrote some documents and sent them one by one to the 2 commanders and 6 division commanders. Everyone take a look. This is the information from the Security Department. More than a month ago, North Korean envoy Zhang Linji entered Beiming's Kyoto to pay tribute. And it was also more than a month ago that Northern Ming had proposed to buy horses from the Prairie City. However, because they wanted to trade on credit, they were rejected by us. The two things that seemed to be unrelated were now mentioned by Yang Chendong together, and the faces of several officers became dark. So, North Korea's attack at sea should have a lot to do with Beiming? Just as everyone's thoughts were changing, Yang Chendong once again gestured to Beta Persei, and another document and map were sent to the hands of the officers above the division level. These are two maps of North Korea obtained by the Intelligence Department. They clearly mark the deployment of the North Korean military forces. After comparison, the two pieces of information are consistent. It should be true and credible. If you have any opinions, you can speak up. What else is there to say? Of course we'll fight. This time, no matter who ordered the North Korean Navy to fire at our 5-star army, it's a provocation. They should be prepared for our retaliation. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong was the first to speak. It seemed that Gao Xiong was a little agitated and even a little straightforward, but in fact he had already expressed his attitude. The enemy this time was only the North Korean army, and it had nothing to do with Beiming. This was also the reason why Yang Chendong wanted to explain the North Korean diplomatic mission to Beiming to everyone first. If he didn't make some things clear now, the officers below would inevitably figure it out. If this matter was related to Beiming, then after the war with North Korea, would they fight Beiming? Even if the Great Ming dynasty had been divided into the south, Beiming's territory was still not small. A lot of preparation was needed to take down Beiming. With Xianxia's current strength, he didn't have the appetite to take down Beiming. It wasn't that the 5-star army wasn't strong enough, but that Xianxia wasn't strong enough. If they fought now, there was a high chance of winning the final victory. But what about after they successfully occupied it? How would they manage such a large territory? How would they arrange for the Han people? Yang Chendong's goal was to let the Han people live a good life. He wanted them to walk at the top of the world and become the most respected race in the world. If they only took down Beiming but couldn't manage it, and instead let the people live a bitter life, then it would go against his original intention. This wasn't what Yang Chendong wanted to see and hoped for. Chapter 936. Therefore it's not that Beiming can't fight, but they must be prepared. It's best if they can receive it safely. Even if they can't, they must think about all kinds of things to deal with after the war. With the current strength of Xianxia, he can't do this, so it's better not to move and continue to accumulate strife. This is one of the themes of Yang Chendong's meeting today. Fighting North Korea is fine, whether it's to show the dignity of the 5-star army or to avenge the dead brothers. This war must be fought. But it must not involve other people, especially Beiming. No one is allowed to cause trouble, otherwise it will be asking for trouble. Gao Xiong saw this and immediately expressed it with practical actions. Those who can become officers of the army and division are all smart people. They all stood up and expressed their opinions one by one. There is only one purpose, and that is, this time only the North Korean army is targeting them and they only want to fight the North Korean army. The strategic goal is set, then it's time to choose the army to fight. Under the leadership of Yang Chendong, the 2nd Marine Army got a chance to fight. This is also the opportunity that the 6th Young Master gave the 2nd Marine Army more opportunities to practice. Although the individual quality of the 2nd Marine Army soldiers is still very good, after all they still lack combat experience. This time it's a good opportunity to deal with North Korea. Next, they just need to wait for them to come up with a battle plan. After leaving the Navy headquarters, Yang Chendong went to the Chiging City Lord's mansion again to plan who to send to North Korea. In history, North Korea is like a willow tree, always used to fall with the wind. Yang Chendong naturally has no good impression of such a country, and this time they dared to provoke him, so there's no need for them to exist. Arranging 200,000 Han people to enter North Korea is the task Yang Chendong gave to Yu Qian. Because of this matter, Yu Qian was both happy and in pain. In his eyes, this 6th young master was a bit too belligerent, and the direct result was that the Han commoners were increasingly lacking. As long as there were knowledgeable commoners who had a sense of nationality, they would always be sent to other places. Even now, some of the large factories in Crimson City were lacking in manpower. Because of this matter, the directors of those large factories had often come to find him to vent their anger, making quite a bit of trouble. She knew that Zhou Xian was a hard-working person, so as long as you looked for him because of work, needless to say he would never get angry. However, this made Zhou Xian suffer. Yang Qindong was the one who gave the order to transfer people away. His subordinates did not dare to ask the sixth young master for an explanation, so they all came to him. How could he not be in pain? But on the contrary, every time Xianxia sent out a few Han Chinese, it meant that Xianxia's territory had expanded and the Han Chinese's influence had increased. Xianxia's life in the future would be better. As a Han person with a strong sense of national pride, Zhou Xian felt very happy about this. He was very optimistic about Yang Qindong's way of doing things. In his view, the Han people had the best history of civilization, the highest intelligence, and even the kindest heart. They were educated, courteous, and open-minded. They should be the rulers and should not drag out an ignoble existence under the oppression of the foreign races. Yang Qindong was working hard to do this step. Since he had caught up with this good era, of course he should do his best to cooperate with him. Therefore, whenever there was a need for cadres, half of the city lord's mansion would be taken away. When another batch of cadres was finally formed, it would not take long for them to be taken away again. Even his own son was sent out. However, he was not angry at all. He was still in pain and happy at the same time. He was happy and happy at the same time. This time Yang Qindong came to ask for people again. Zhou Xian gritted his teeth and decided to take away another 200,000 people. But considering that if this continued, the Han population would become smaller and smaller, and in the end, they would not be able to make ends meet. Thus he couldn't help but remind Duke Zhongdan of the Han people that were brought back with money. Other than the elderly and children, there are less than 2 million adult men and women left after several transfers. Moreover, most of them are illiterate. It is too difficult to train these people without any foundation. I'm afraid that it won't be so easy next time. Rest assured, City Lord. The south of the Great Ming Dynasty is currently at war, and I have already arranged for people to take in the Han commoners. At that time, there will be many homeless commoners who can no longer live and will be transported to Crimson City. There will be a large number of them, and it will be enough to make up for the shortage. However, it will take a lot of effort to train them. After all, in the future they will represent the Han people and go to various places to be masters. In terms of quality, they must be improved. I do not wish for their gluttony and laziness to lead to the dissatisfaction of the other races. If that is the case, no matter how many troops we have, it will not be enough. Yang Qindong replied with a smile. While he was exporting, he did not forget to import. He repeated this process over and over again. The commoners who entered Crimson City were ignorant and poor, while the commoners who left were knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Under their influence, the areas under their rule would definitely develop better and better, and the overall situation would also become better and better. Good. With the words of the Duke Zhongdan, this old man is relieved. Zhou Xian smiled with satisfaction. He was very much in favor of Yang Qindong using the people to influence the people, using culture to influence the culture of the foreign race, and using habits to influence the culture of the foreign race. As long as this matter was done well, perhaps after 100 years or even not so long, it would only take 2 or 3 generations, everyone would be used to the Han people being the most powerful and noble race in the world. They would be used to learning Chinese and speaking the Han language. In the long run, it was possible for the world to become one. Zhou Xian promised to give another 200,000 people who were already educated and had a certain level of skills. This was equivalent to having the cornerstone to enter North Korea. Next, Yang Qindong successively gave orders to Shiqing, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Luzon, and other places. He asked them to prepare 30,000 to 100,000 people and prepare to move out. At the same time, they were also prepared to accept the same number of people who moved back. Yang Qindong wanted to use this method to make a big change. First, the density of the local population would be diluted, and the outsiders would gradually occupy the place. When the time was right, the local residents would have to leave the place where they grew up. In this way, these people would become rootless trees and there would be no need to worry about what they would do. This was a long-term work, and it was also a big project. Only someone like Yang Qindong, who had a huge territory and enough financial resources, could do this. Yang Qindong, who had been busy for a day, returned to the palace. The first thing he did was to go to the second husband's bedroom to see his eldest daughter, Lei Lei. Lele had been born for more than 10 days. Her eyes could already see the outside world clearly. Her big eyes were very cute. Whenever Yang Qindong held her in his arms, she would stick close to him tightly, and then carefully look at the man who was holding her. She was curious and very quiet. In the words of the first Madame Hu Yen, this was the feeling of blood. Little Lele knew that this was her father, the person closest to her in the world. So every time she was in her father's arms, she was very obedient and didn't make a fuss. These words made Yang Qindong, who was used to not showing his emotions on his face, so he was elated. Every time this happened, he would proudly say that he was a qualified father, a great father, and a father who cared deeply for his daughter. Yang Qindong liked little Lele so much that Xiao Yin, who was still in confinement, was very satisfied. Originally, she thought that giving birth to a daughter would cause the young master to be unhappy. Now it seemed that she had worried too much. In fact, it wasn't just Xiao Yin. The other madams also had the same idea. But with little Lele's pearl in front of them, everyone was a lot more relieved. Presumably, no matter if it was a boy or a girl, the husband would be very happy. But happy days always seemed to be short. 3 days later, a set of very specific battle plans were sent to Yang Qindong by the 2nd Marine Army. Looking at the battle plans that were originally drawn up according to the Korean military's deployment, Yang Qindong waved his pen and approved. This also indicated that he didn't have much time left in Choken City. Next, he needed to return to the battlefield and let those who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth know what the consequences of angering him for having ideas about the 5-star army were. At the end of the 8th month of the year 1454, more than 600 ships of various sizes, including 6 large warships, New Number 4, New Number 5, New Number 6, War God Number 4, Number 5 and Number 6, more than 100 medium-sized warships, several hundred small warships and more than 100 transport ships. Under Yang Qindong's personal leadership, the 2nd Marine Army was mobilized. The 4th Marine Division, 5th Marine Division and 6th Marine Division, totaling more than 20,000 people, left Choken City's naval port and headed straight for the Korean kingdom thousands of miles away. After years of continuous efforts by Choken City's shipyard, the warships had been converted from wind and human power to combustion power. The technology couldn't be said to be very mature, especially in terms of flexibility. There was still a lot of room for improvement. But in terms of speed, it was already very fast. Especially those small warships. Once they entered the sea, they were like fish. Whether it was forward or backward, whether there was wind or no waves, whether it was sunny or rainy, their speed was extremely fast. This time, these hundreds of small warships acted as scouts. They guarded the 2 sides of the large fleet and headed straight for the Korean kingdom. Along the way, whenever they encountered a ship that wasn't on their side, they would stop it if they could. If they couldn't, they would use cannons to sink it. In short, they were not allowed to spread the news. Since a long time ago, the 5-star army had taken control of the Ming dynasty's East China Sea. Usually, the number of ships that could be seen here was very limited. This made it easy for them to clean up. Along the way, they sealed off all information. A few days later, they arrived at the Korean Strait and bumped into the first batch of Korean naval forces. Chapter 937. This time the 2nd Marine Corps came prepared. They were light and did not bring too many supplies, allowing them to reach the fastest speed possible. As soon as they saw their target, they surrounded the enemy ship. Hundreds of small warships surrounded the enemy ship like ants. Lock onto the target. All ships will fire until they sink or surrender. The commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, Yu Guang, asked Yang Qindong in the command room before giving the first order. Yang Qindong, who was also in the command room, did not speak from beginning to end. He just watched everything that happened in front of him as an observer. Since Yu Guang was able to get Gao Xiong's recommendation to be the commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, he should be very capable. In front of people who had been in naval warfare for many years, Yang Qindong would not casually give orders and interrupt the other party's command plan. On the warships of the 2nd Marine Corps there were fixed cannons. Except for the 6 main ships, the cannons on the other ships were not made in the large warehouse. They were directly made by the shipyard in Resin City. Their weakness was that their attack range was short, the power of the cannons was small and the accuracy was poor. However, because they were cheap and the cannons were simple to make, there were enough of them. When the 500 warships, not including the transport ships, formed a circle and surrounded the North Korean Navy, and after the siege began, cannon fire filled the sky. One cannonball after another was fired from the warships. One after another, huge waves flashed in the area. If one was unlucky, a North Korean ship would be hit by a cannonball. In light cases, the ship would be tilted and unable to fight. In heavy cases, the ship would directly sink and the people on board would be fed to the fish. This kind of unequal battle only took a little more than an hour and it was already over. Of the 50 North Korean ships, 12 were sunk, 18 were heavily damaged, and the remaining 20 or so were forced to hang the white flag and surrender. From the beginning to the end, not a single enemy ship escaped. After completing the first battle with a high standard posture, the commander of the Second Army, Yu Guang, asked for instructions from Yang Chendong to continue moving forward. While the other side was still unaware of the news of their arrival, they directly drove into the other side's military port and carried out a surprise attack. Agreed. Yang Chendong looked at the map and saw that the North Korean Navy's port was only 200 nautical miles away from them. He nodded and approved of the battle plan. General Yue Guang immediately gave the order to leave a portion of the ships to clean up the mess, while the other ships headed towards the North Korean Navy port. The main force of the 3 divisions arrived in the evening. At this moment, the North Korean Navy was completely defenseless. The soldiers were eating dinner when the artillery shells fell from the sky. They didn't even need to use the 6 main cabins to open fire. Just the firepower of the other small and medium-sized warships was enough to turn this place into a sea of fire. Then they took advantage of the night to enter and seize the Navy port in the dark, establishing the victory of the second battle. Even in the middle of the night, the landing of the transport ships did not stop. In the past, who knew how many times they had chosen to train at night? Now it finally came in handy. C Division 4, C Division 5, and C Division SXS Cold Vanguard warriors landed on land. Armed with 95-style Hwada and 7-star repeating crossbows, they charged straight for the heart of North Korea. On the 6th day of the 9th month, the 4th Division of the 2nd Sea Army, under the command of Ding Yen and the 1st World Cavalry Division, took the lead in attacking Pusan. In just 2 hours they broke through the Korean army and reached Seoul in just half a month. The 5th Division of the 5th Sea Army under the command of He Gong and the 6th Sea Army under the command of Guyang followed. They fought all the way to Pyongyang and chased Li Yong, who had just survived the Gyujing disaster and finally seized the throne and became the king of Korea, to the Yalu River. The reason why it was so simple was not because I was lazy but because I had no choice. Facing the strength of the Cold Vanguard Division, the entire battle could be summed up in one word: one-sided. All in all, the North Korean army kept running and the 5-star army kept chasing. Even if the 5-star army didn't chase, the North Korean army would still run. They didn't defend Seoul and they didn't defend Pyongyang. With the war going on like this, the morale of the North Korean army was already low. It was impossible to organize a counterattack. Lee Illinois brought his important officials Zhang Linji and Han Ming to the Yalu River. His face was still filled with panic. From the start of the war he received news of cities falling. At first, Lee Illinois was really shocked. Ever since he sent Han Ming to intercept the 5-star army and sink 4 of their ships, he had been waiting for news of them coming to negotiate. Because of this, Lee Illinois couldn't wait to show off his skills in front of the Beiming Emperor. He had even sent an official to the capital of Beiming to report good news to Emperor Daijong. The general idea was that they had succeeded in stopping the 5-star army. Now they just had to wait for the 5-star army to come. Then they could state their conditions. Actually, from anyone's point of view, this should be the result. Unless the 5-star army didn't want this route anymore, they would have to lower their heads. As for whether the 5-star army would fight head-on, Lee Illinois didn't even think about it. This was his territory. Although North Korea was small, they had more than 300 ships. Once a war started, it wouldn't be so easy to end it. Once it became a protracted war, he had the port and docks to replenish his resources and manpower. Who would he be afraid of? However, he didn't expect the 5-star army to really attack. Not only that, but the North Korean Navy had defeated their navy so quickly and there was no news at all. The powerful and invincible North Korean Navy in his heart had been completely wiped out. This was already something that Li Ji didn't dare to imagine. What was even more unexpected was that the North Korean army, which usually looked very capable, was so vulnerable in the face of the five-star army's attack. Each and every one of them was defending a strong city, but they couldn't even withstand a single round of attack. Their cities were broken one after another, and in the end, they even lost the country's capital. Thinking back to when he was on the watchtower of Seoul, he saw the horde of cavalry sweeping over like a storm. Then his soldiers didn't even have the courage to fight back. Every time Lee Illinois thought about this, his body couldn't help but tremble. The five-star army was actually so powerful. Just their aura alone was enough to disperse the morale of his troops. What a powerful existence this was. Before this, he actually wanted to provoke them. He really didn't know what was good for him. Li Gui didn't know that he had made a huge mistake. He didn't know the true face of Mount Lu and was only fated to be in this mountain. All along, the North Korean military was very weak. They didn't have any real combat experience, so they thought that they were the strongest army in the world. They were busy fighting each other every day, and the training and control of the military were completely based on the situation. The civil officials were busy fighting for power, while the military officials were busy earning money. No one cared about the life and death of the soldiers at the bottom. As a result, the military was already extremely weak. Using a set of data as an example, the North Korean army that reported to Lee Illinois had a total of 150,000 soldiers. This was the so-called standing army. If there was a real war, they could still mobilize 200,000 soldiers from the civilian population. However, more than half of the 150,000 standing troops had been robbed of their pay and salaries. In other words, the generals reported 150,000 soldiers, but in reality, they only had around 60,000 to 70,000 soldiers. This was the total number of people from the Navy and the Army. No matter what, they had such a large territory and so few soldiers. They also didn't have much time to train. Furthermore, they were facing the powerful Leng Feng's army and the world's #1 cavalry division that even Leng Feng admired. Their defeat was already set in stone. After being chased out of his own country, Lee Illinois was naturally very angry. Fortunately, he managed to escape and even came to Baiming's territory. Walking on this black land, he finally regained some of his confidence. How about this? This king will immediately write a letter to Baiming's emperor and ask him to send troops to take back everything for us. In Li Il's eyes, the great Ming dynasty was still omnipotent. Even if it was forced to split into the north and south for some reason, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Furthermore, the leader of the five-star army was the Duke of Loyalty personally conferred by the great Ming dynasty's emperor. Lee Illinois didn't dare to offend his superior. With his only hope, Li Gui led his officials into the Gaizhou guard office in the Liao capital of northern Ming. At the same time, he wrote an extremely formal letter of credence and had it sent to the capital of northern Ming by the fastest speed possible. Just as Lee Illinois was waiting for Baiming's emperor to come out and make a decision for him, something unimaginable happened. It was something that he didn't even dare to think about before. Gai Prefecture, which was still the same yesterday, was actually surrounded by armored cavalry today. Naturally, it was the 1st Cavalry Division that Yang Chendong personally conferred. After experiencing the destruction of Kim Bien dynasty, the destruction of Luzon, and the destruction of North Korea, their forces had suffered losses, and they had not had time to replenish. It seemed that there were only more than 5,000 people, but after a long period of killing, each of them exuded a bloodthirsty aura. Even if they were riding on horses, they would give people a feeling that they were the emissaries of hell. It would make people involuntarily afraid and shudder involuntarily. They suddenly appeared and surrounded the Gai Prefecture guard office. They were ordered by the Heavenly Khan to catch the culprit. Whether it was General Han Mingjin who commanded the Battle of the Korean Strait, or the new king of North Korea, Lee Illinois, who was the instigator behind the battle, they were not caught and brought to justice. This made the Navy soldiers hold their breath. Now it seemed that they had to vent their anger after the great victory. Therefore, Yang Chendong gave the order to catch the main culprit. Even if Lee Illinois and the others hid in the Baiming guard office, they still couldn't escape the fate of being surrounded. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.